Hello and welcome to this special meeting of the Council of the Town of Oakville. This meeting has been called to consider only one matter, and that is the Lakeshore Road West Class Environmental Assessment Update. And I'm going to start by announcing that we have regrets from Councillor Sanju, and I'm going to ask Council for any declarations of pecuniary interest. And Madam Clerk, I do not see any. Council and public, we have a presentation from Jill Stephen, who is the Director of Transportation and Engineering, and we have other staff available for Council if they have questions. Ms. Stephen, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Burton. Good evening, members of Council, registered delegates, and those watching the meeting online tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to present the recommendations of Lakeshore West Improvement Study. There's a lot of history associated with this project, and tonight we will walk through the analysis and how we have assessed the impacts of the various objectives related to the scenic corridor, stormwater management, approved master plans, safety for all road users in order to reach the recommendations of the study. The Lakeshore Road West Class Environmental Assessment study includes 4.5 years of study, consultation, and analysis. Tonight's report recommends that the EA be concluded and that we move on to the detailed design phase for the active transportation infrastructure recommended in the study. With the removal of the previously recommended widening and center turn lane, the majority of the recommendations do not require an environmental assessment approval in order to proceed. EA or environmental assessment approval is required, though, for the replacement of the structure at McCraney Creek. And tonight's report recommends that the elements related to McCraney Creek be consolidated as a separate EA document and filed on the public record. As mentioned, tonight's presentation will focus on the recommendations of the study and staff report on the approach taken to reach these recommendations. The Lakeshore Road EA covers over 6 kilometers of Lakeshore Road from Mississauga Street to Dorval Drive. The study area was divided into 4 segments: from Mississauga Street to East Street, from East Street to 3rd Line, from 3rd Line to Dorval, from 3rd Line to 4th Line, and from 4th Line to Dorval. The purpose of the study was to identify improvements to address pedestrian and cycling safety and accessibility, as well as traffic safety for all road users, roadway design to meet current standards, intersection safety and improvements, drainage and stormwater management, and creek crossings and structures. In analyzing how to address each of these areas, we had to consider many important factors. Staff has assessed the alternatives based on the approved master plans, technical standards, and engineering principles, and made recommendations accordingly. The community character and whether the community impacts have been accurately assessed is where we looked for Council's view on if and how the recommendations have met the mark when it comes to the scenic corridor. The different objectives and direction for this study didn't always complement each other, and in fact, sometimes there were conflicts. For example, new and improved turning lanes at intersections provide for a safe operation of the transportation network, but they can also increase impervious surfaces. Continuous active transportation infrastructure provides dedicated space for walking and cycling and supports reduced motorized vehicle trips and emissions, but also could have impacts to property or trees. The corridor review has been broken into smaller blocks as shown, recognizing that part of what makes Lakeshore Road special is that it's not exactly the same all the way along. And at the detailed design stage, that review will be done at an even finer grain. This study has a long history, and I ask that you please permit me to provide you with some background on how we got to today. The study itself started in 2016 with public consultation events in 2017 before developing the original recommendations. Council has since considered 3 previous reports on this study. In May 2018, staff presented a report that included a continuous center turn lane, as well as active transportation and stormwater improvements. The project was referred back to staff for additional consultation regarding the implications of that center turn lane on tree preservation, property expropriation, and daylight triangles. And that led to a public meeting that we held in July 2018 at the Sir John Colborne Center. In August 2018, staff provided a project update and were directed to report back with recommendations that included at least one option reflecting no continuous center turn lane, no loss of trees, no expropriation of property, while maintaining cycle lanes and reflecting sidewalks and multi-use paths on at least one side while minimizing impervious surfaces. And in August 2019, staff provided another update to council and were directed to undertake a scenic corridor study for Lakeshore Road West, Lakeshore Road East, and for Trafalgar Road south of Cornwall. And using that information to amend the Class EA scope and work plan to incorporate the findings. The scenic corridor study was completed and presented to council early in 2020, and the findings of that study were incorporated into the Lakeshore Road EA evaluation. There were 4 major themes of the scenic corridor study, including the importance of maintaining trees and vegetation, the importance of maintaining and complementing the historical attributes of the corridor, the importance of maintaining connectivity for pedestrians and cyclists, and the importance of maintaining the proportions of the current roadway. Under each of those themes, there were guiding principles that provided additional direction for the evaluation of the alternatives during the Lakeshore Road West study. Given the nature of this study, the EA requirements for public consultation were insufficient for the required scope. Multiple opportunities for public input were provided throughout the study, and they included a mix of formal events such as public information centers, public meetings, and a stakeholder committee, as well as informal opportunities such as on-site meetings with residents, phone calls, and emails. Even though the EA was no longer required for the transportation improvements, the EA process did provide a forum for that consultation, as well as a forum for the evaluation of alternatives by reviewing them through multiple lenses related to different elements of the environment. The public feedback we've received through this project has been valuable and has been essential to understanding the priorities of the community. On behalf of the study team, I would like to thank all of those who have taken time to provide comments and feedback and to be engaged in this study. We've heard many comments throughout the study, and in the last few months, we've heard from hundreds of residents and stakeholders. The comments we received were varied and come from various different perspectives. We've heard from some who are happy with the recommendations as they're presented. There are some people who feel the recommendations before you tonight go too far. And we've heard from others who feel that the recommendations do not go far enough. However, it's very clear from all of the comments received that Lakeshore is very important to our community. And whether those comments are coming from the perspective of tree preservation or from the perspective of providing safe, active transportation infrastructure, they were all made with a look to the future and how Lakeshore will serve our future generations. Please allow me now to take some time to go through the study objectives. The study objectives themselves were defined through the EA process, and were identified as the problem and opportunity statement to identify improvements to address safety for all road users, roadway design to meet current standards, pavement conditions and asset management, drainage and stormwater management, and creek crossings and structures. Additional objectives came from the August 2018 Council direction and from the Scenic Corridor study. The study was also guided by the approved stormwater, transportation, and active transportation master plans. Council gave a specific direction on August 2018 to provide an option with no tree impacts, no property impacts, and minimal impervious area increase. Looking simply at safety, we are unable to achieve that direction, and therefore there's no option in the report tonight that addresses all of those elements. Safety for all road users is a priority, and so while we could not find an option that met that no impact council direction, we did work to find an option with minimal impacts in all of those areas. As part of the study, we completed a road safety performance assessment and traffic operations analysis. This work identified intersection improvements needed to provide for the safe operation of the corridor for all road users. This slide shows 2 areas where intersection improvements are recommended. At Bronte and Lakeshore, to improve the alignment and to improve visibility, as well as provide AODA compliance and shorten the crossing distance for pedestrians. There will be tree impacts and impacts to public property to achieve this. At Third Line and Lakeshore, there will also be tree impacts on each corner. But for example, adjustments to the westbound right turn lane related to the cycling lane will impact a tree there. While we could not meet all of the criteria from the August 2018 direction, we were able to significantly reduce the impacts to property and trees by removing the center turn lane east of Bronte Village from consideration. This also significantly reduced the amount of new impervious area while contributing to reaching the objectives of the problem and opportunity statement. One of the recommendations of this study is to replace the structure at McCraney Creek Crossing. The McCraney Creek Crossing is an arch culvert built in 1940 and subsequently extended with a box culvert section. In a regional storm, the current structure would be overtopped to a depth that would impact the ability for emergency vehicles to safely use Lakeshore Road. Providing additional capacity here to convey the regional storm addresses that overtopping and also reduces the potential for upstream flooding. In July 2017, emergency work was undertaken to temporarily stabilize the road embankment slope as a result of the northwest wing wall collapse. Erosion issues along the West Creek bank will continue and will need to be addressed through remedial creek works. And so due to the structural condition and the hydraulic capacity of the structure, we are recommending replacement. There are class environmental assessment requirements associated with replacing bridges that are more than 40 years old. These technical requirements have been met through the Lakeshore Road Environmental Study Report. The new structure will include 2 traffic lanes, on-road bike lanes, sidewalks, and pedestrian separation barriers. And staff recommend that we file a separate EA before the end of this year using the information from this study. There are additional bridges within the study area, particularly at Bronte Creek and at 14 Mile Creek. These 2 bridges are in good condition and do not require significant repairs or replacement. The bridge decks will be modified to provide the active transportation facilities and the travel lanes recommended in this study. The recommendations from the approved 2019 Comprehensive Townwide Stormwater Master Plan and the approved 2017 Coronation Park Area EA were incorporated into the Lakeshore study. Lakeshore Road West is part of numerous drainage areas where stormwater improvements were identified. The improvements for stormwater are to address the larger drainage area needs and are not specific to the stormwater on Lakeshore Road. The colors on this diagram identify the levels of risk, red being higher risk and orange being moderate risk. And as you can see, there are many catchments that cross Lakeshore Road within the study area. Without stormwater improvements, these drainage areas, and not just Lakeshore Road, are at higher risk for basement backups, roadway flooding, creek erosion, and damage to public or private property. The study recommends using a combination of storm sewers and green infrastructure to address stormwater requirements. In terms of green infrastructure, existing ditches will be maintained to the extent possible to provide an informal water quality treatment benefit to treat water from the right-of-way prior to conveying it to the storm sewer system. Converting these existing ditches to enhanced swales would provide the opportunity to formalize water quality benefits of those roadside ditches. Soil cells are proposed primarily in the Bronte area to provide for enhanced growing condition for trees. Bioretention facilities provide stormwater attenuation and water quality control. And curb sections are recommended to provide conveyance capacity for overland flow, as well as to provide for safe separation between cars and other uses, and to protect the road edge from deterioration. Opportunities for rolled curbs would be reviewed during the detailed design. These stormwater improvements are required regardless of the Lakeshore Road improvements. This recommendation provides for an increased level of service that protects our community from flooding, addresses climate change impacts, and will make our community more resilient. The only way to achieve the stormwater requirements for the rest of the catchment area is to make improvements on Lakeshore Road. All of these improvements are necessary to be part of the solution. And the diagram on this slide shows the extent of the study area and how these different green stormwater elements are distributed across the entire corridor. The existing active transportation infrastructure along Lakeshore Road today includes sections with bike lanes, sidewalks, or multi-use trails, but this infrastructure is not consistent or continuous. In some areas, the area used by pedestrians and cyclists is right beside the lane used by cars and trucks, with no separation between the two. Safety is a concern where there is no buffer between cars, pedestrians, and cyclists. Some of the comments we received during the study were that Lakeshore Road functions fine just the way it is. They say that there's not a lot of congestion and the existing sidewalks are sufficient for those who want to walk. The traffic analysis did show that the traffic volumes are not expected to increase significantly on Lakeshore. But that work is predicated on us meeting our mode split targets, which means moving more trips to walking, cycling, and transit. As I mentioned earlier, there were some objectives that we tried to meet through the study that sometimes conflicted with each other, and providing active transportation infrastructure and protecting and preserving our trees were two of those examples. Lakeshore is identified as a primary route or spine in our active transportation master plan. That continuous, predictable active transportation infrastructure was also one of the themes of the scenic corridor study. Just like we had to assess the competing technical factors in developing the recommendations, we also have to respect the differing public comments that we have received. We've heard from people who feel that the infrastructure we have is sufficient to support those who want to walk and cycle, or maybe we could tweak it just a little bit. That protection of the tree canopy and vegetation are paramount, and that Lakeshore Road functions well as it is, and therefore we do not need new infrastructure. The feedback we received in this case is that the trees and their contribution to the nature of Lakeshore Road are the most important factors here. That decisions should be based on protecting our trees and our tree canopy, and preserving the trees should take precedence over all other factors. But we also heard the opposite. We heard that we need more and varied active transportation infrastructure, including extending the multi-use trail into Block 4. That multi-use trails provide safe spaces for families, for recreational cyclists, and for pedestrians, while continuous bike lanes support avid cyclists comfortable with on-road experiences. Some pointed to the increased cycling rates that we've experienced during the pandemic, and that those can be expected to be permanent changes, and we should be investing in bike infrastructure to make Oakville a safe community for all road users, with some residents saying that safety should be the deciding factor, even though that will mean the loss of some trees. In accordance with the guiding principles from the Scenic Corridor Study, the recommendations provide for the overall mobility through active transportation infrastructure, provide different users with different ways to safely experience the corridor, provide ready access to destinations such as the lake or Coronation Park, as well as connectivity to the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail and its offshoot, and minimize impacts to trees. I'd now like to go through the general cross-sections for each block. These are representative cross-sections, and at detailed design, we will make refinements to further mitigate impacts to trees, impervious area, and property. In Block 1, from Mississauga Street to Bronte Road, the recommendation is to follow the existing cross-section west of Mississauga Street, with 3 lanes instead of 4, and using that extra space to provide buffered bike lanes. There would also be sidewalks on both sides of the road. There were some concerns raised regarding the reduction in lanes from 4 to 3, and therefore this section is not proposed to move forward until the Wycroft Bridge has opened, providing additional east-west capacity. Through Bronte Village, we maintain sidewalks on both sides, along with on-road bike lanes. There will also be some on-street parking on Lakeshore to support the activity within the BIA area. Streetscaping elements are proposed, and we've worked through the development process to secure contributions to the streetscape. The trees that will be impacted in this block will be replaced with silvicels, as was shown on the stormwater management slide, to provide for the growth medium for them to grow and thrive. This slide depicts the representative cross-section from East Street to 4th Line, so through blocks 2 and 3, with a multi-use trail on the south side and a sidewalk on the north side. Buffered bike lanes are provided on street. There's no center turn lane in this section, but there are dedicated left and right turn lanes at some intersections, as there are today. The widths shown for the bike lanes in the multi-use trail are based on the recommended widths in Book 18 of the Ontario Traffic Manual. At detailed design, we will look for opportunities to further mitigate impacts to trees and property, and narrowing sections of the multi-use trail to 2.4 meters or of the bike lanes to 1.5 meters are opportunities that we can explore. Here in Block 4, between 4th Line and Dorval, we selected the minimal impact alternative in order to minimize the tree removals. Had we recommended continuing with the multi-use trail, the number of potentially impacted trees would be 122, including 45 trees greater than 20 centimeters diameter at breast height. By maintaining the existing sidewalk, we have reduced the impact the number of impacted trees by over 100 in that block, and also reduced the impact to larger trees by 36. Although the provision of a multi-use trail in this area was considered important by many residents, the significant impact to the trees, maintaining the scenic corridor of this segment, outweighed the benefits of providing the multi-use trail. Without a multi-use trail, cyclists will need to move to the bike lane in this section, and it's also recommended in this section that we fill in the existing gaps in the sidewalks. The preferred solution, as detailed in the environmental study report, significantly reduces the impacts from the recommendation that was presented to Council in spring of 2018. This May, we also conducted a preliminary arborist report of the trees that were under-reviewed due to their potential impacts. Some of the trees included in the environmental study report have been removed for reasons unrelated to the project, and so the 123 trees listed in that report is now 101. Further, the preliminary arborist report found that 11 of those 101 trees were dead or dying, and that 30 of them can be protected through construction. So the expected number of impacted healthy trees is reduced to 60. The changes in the recommendations since 2018 have resulted in a reduction of tree impacts by over 71%, a reduction in property impacts by 93% in blocks 2 and 3, a reduction in the impervious area by 77% in blocks 2, 3, and 4. And detailed design provides us with a further opportunity to reduce these impacts. An arborist report will be a key component of the detailed design work. The environmental study report includes a mitigation plan for construction. That mitigation plan addresses many factors, including noise, terrestrial and aquatic habitat, archaeological, cultural heritage, as well as the tree canopy and vegetation. And that mitigation plan will be formalized through the detailed design process. Given the importance of trees along the Lakeshore corridor, should Council wish, staff could be directed to bring the detailed design back to Council for review so that the impacts to trees can be reassessed prior to construction. The recommendations of the environmental study report address pedestrian and cyclist safety and accessibility through the provision of safe, predictable, and continuous active transportation infrastructure. Traffic safety through the provision of intersection improvements and application of current engineering design standards. Asset management by providing pavement conditions, by addressing pavement conditions and replacing the McCraney Creek crossing. Drainage and stormwater management improvements through implementing the recommendations of the Stormwater Master Plan for green infrastructure and for storm sewers, and retain healthy, mature trees within the right-of-way where possible, along with planning for tree replacement using native species. There are multiple objectives at play in developing these recommendations and in determining how to move forward. We can't achieve every one of the objectives to 100%, and sometimes the choices are not easy ones. As staff, we have assessed the options and made our recommendations based on the council-approved master plans and on good engineering practices and standards, as well as the recommendations presented for active transportation, and the recommendations presented for active transportation and stormwater management meet the objectives of the environmental assessment report. Some of the objectives are not tied to technical standards. They are the objectives that are most directly related to the community character. And for council, tonight's presentation provides the opportunity to assess the community impacts and whether we have struck the right balance with the recommendations. In conclusion, Mayor Burton, there are 3 recommendations before council tonight: that the Lakeshore West Environmental Assessment Study be concluded, that the the preferred solution be approved, and we proceed to detailed design. Through that, looking at opportunities to further mitigate the tree impacts, specifically related to active transportation infrastructure. As mentioned, without the previously recommended road widening, the majority of the recommendations no longer require EA approval. However, EA approval is required for the structure at McCraney Creek, and therefore we recommend that a separate EA be prepared for the McCraney Bridge, making use of the work completed to date. Mayor Burton and members of council, that concludes my presentation from tonight. Staff from the project team and I are all available for questions, should you have any. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the detailed presentation. Council, would you like to ask questions now or wait until after the delegations and then ask your questions? I'm seeing a sense of waiting until after the delegations. All right. Then, Council, we have 15 registered delegations, and at 10 minutes each, that is 150 minutes, and that's 2.5 hours as I do the math. So everybody get comfy. And Madam Clerk, would you please call the first delegation?
The first delegation is Pamela Knight, who's representing Coronation Parks Residents Association.
Welcome, Ms. Knight. Council looks forward to your information.
Pamela, are you available? Oh. You are unmuted. You can talk now. We can't hear you.
Me now.
We can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of council, thanks for the opportunity. We had a few glitches there, but I'm sure we'll move forward from there. I have a great deal of information to impart this evening, so I will try to get through it as quickly as possible. And I want to preface my remarks by saying that my comments on behalf of Coronation Park Residents Association do not relate to the village of Bronte. We have limited our comments and concerns to the area from East Street to Dorval, so not Bronte Village itself. So if we could move forward with slide 1, please. Thank you. The areas that I want to touch on are those that you see on the screen. Essentially, the negative impact of this proposal on our scenic corridor, the removal of more than 100 trees, effects of the multi-use path, urbanization of the road and what that represents, and fiscal responsibility. Next slide, please. We already know that Lakeshore Road is of special significance in Oakville. There are a number of policies, reports, and a council motion that I will go through. First, of course, is our official plan, in the fact that our urban structure identifies Lakeshore Road as a scenic corridor. In doing so, it's recognized for its value and natural and cultural heritage, and the fact that these important features need to be maintained or restored since they add value and contribute to the town's character. As well, that policy is supported by other policies in the official plan. And Section 5, for instance, in the case of Lakeshore Road, Policy 5.3.10 states, the scenic character of Lakeshore Road should be conserved. Next slide, please. The town also has a policy statement in terms of tree preservation, in that the town is committed to preserve and enhance its tree canopy and natural vegetation. The town shall protect trees on both public and private lands. As well, trees on public land shall be removed only to safeguard public safety, and that the policy recognizes the importance of the tree canopy and many environmental, economic, and social benefits of our urban forests have to communities. We also have a biodiversity strategy, which I believe is on the next slide, if you could. Yes, thank you. Which was introduced in 2018. Again, we're advised that preventing further loss of existing trees is the best way to increase our canopy in Oakville. Protecting street trees will allow that canopy to increase. And more recently, council passed a motion declaring a climate emergency in Oakville, and that's supported by plans to report annually on climate change actions, as well as ongoing updates to the climate change strategy. Next slide, please. The scenic corridor study, which has already been mentioned. I won't go into detail here, but as we know, the scenic corridor study encompassed all of Lakeshore Road and Trafalgar Road. There were a number of significant things that came forth in the study. For instance, the fact that our large mature trees and diverse understory vegetation that frame the corridors are significant contributing elements to the character and the context of the road. Yes, indeed, we must incorporate necessary active transportation. We want to maintain balance between landscape spaces and hard surfaces, and where feasible, incorporate low impact development to enhance the greening of our boulevards. Next slide, please. This is the motion that I made reference to earlier. It dates back to August in 2018. When this proposal came before council earlier. It was moved by Mayor Burton and carried unanimously by council. Staff was asked to return for additional public consultation, and when they came back, they should have a recommendation that included at least one option reflecting no continuous center turn lane, no loss of trees, no expropriation of property, while maintaining cycle lanes, and reflecting sidewalks and or multi-use paths on at least one side and minimizing impervious surfaces. Next slide, please. So when we look at the proposed multi-use path, we find that it is the largest cause of tree loss. In order to accommodate the path, trees, sidewalks, and grass on the south side of Lakeshore will be removed and replaced with a 3-meter wide strip of asphalt. Just west of Third Line, 19 trees in a row that shade the sidewalk and the road will be lost. About 30 more trees will be lost between Third Line and Wolfdale. We'll actually even cut down 8 newly planted trees near Coronation Park. In the image at left, you'll notice a beautiful tree that is one of our century trees. There are dozens of those that we will lose, and we feel these are irreplaceable. Next slide, please. In terms of the impact from the multi-use path, while we have illustrations that suggest it will gently wind its way along Lakeshore and make it quite inviting, construction methods to create that path are actually something quite different. They ruin surroundings, they kill root systems, they compress soil, and they lay down a bed of gravel and asphalt. The little diagram on the left shows you the feeder roots that are the most important roots to feed a tree, and you can see how far past the canopy they travel and how close to the surface they are, which is why they're ruined by this kind of construction. The middle picture is indeed a path that's under construction in Oakville now. And on the right, you'll see an example of what is being proposed, a path that would run almost adjacent to the road alongside the curb. Next slide, please. In terms of tree replacement, we're also being told that, of course, trees that are taken down will be replaced. But we need to remember a few important facts. It takes 20 to 40 years for a tree to provide benefits, like those benefits that we're being given by our trees right now. These smaller trees must also survive the first 3 to 5 years when they're highly vulnerable to drought and injury. We think that in a climate change emergency, preserving what we have right now is of paramount importance. Next slide, please. In terms of connectivity, once again, I think we're in agreement that we need to provide connectivity for walkers, joggers, cyclists, and others, but not at the cost of 100 trees and more asphalt. Adding bike lanes will provide some updated, safer opportunities for cyclists, and then we could move to what we have in terms of good existing resources. There is indeed a sidewalk on the south side of Lakeshore that stretches from Bondi to Dorval and beyond. The recreational trail on the north side of Lakeshore Road covers most of the same area, and yes, indeed, there are a few gaps. I've given you some images. The one on the left is the image, actually the sewage treatment plant, which is east of Coronation Park. The one on the right is nearing Fourth Line at Spring Garden Road, and the one to the bottom is at Norton Road. Next slide, please. So we look at this path and we realize that it's the greatest cause for loss of over 100 trees. It will remove kilometers of perfectly good sidewalk. It's almost the same width as a single traffic lane, which I think is a mental image that we need to consider. It'll add approximately 10,000 square meters of impervious cover to the landscape, and it'll require 5 meters of width to construct and up to 7 meters to function properly, as you can see in this diagram that we've provided. Our solution is why waste? Let's utilize the resources we already have and make them better. Add those bike lanes, fill the gaps in the existing path, add signage to the path, make sure people realize they can use it for biking, they can use it for jogging, they can use it for walking the dog, and save money. Next slide, please. Currently, Lakeshore Road has a rural cross-section. That means it has open ditches, which are also called swales. We have sidewalks, we have a recreational path. You'll also see a number of other attributes there in the bullets. Urbanized roads, on the other hand, have cross-sections that typically include curbs, gutters, catch basins, underground stormwater services, and sidewalks. Next slide, please.
Ms. Knight?
When we look at road urbanization, and
Excuse me,
Ms.
Knight?
Yep.
Are you near the end of your slides? Your 10 minutes has expired.
I think I'm about another 5 minutes, Mayor Burton.
Well, we're not, I don't think we want to make every delegation 15 minutes. Could you finish?
Yes, I will. Perhaps I could touch on stormwater very quickly and move directly to a natural assets study, which Oakville took part in 2017. It was a small area in Ward 2 where there was a combination of gray stormwater and other vegetation. For the person controlling our visuals, it would be slide 17. Thank you, sorry about that. This is a remnant channel that, as you can see, takes forms from the arrows. You can see how long it is. It's about 250 meters, and performs a number of services, conveyance, attenuation, and filtration, and so on. If we could just quickly move to the next slide. a number of services, as you can see, that this channel provides, and its value in terms of what it provides to the overall stormwater system. The fact that the overall system relies on these natural assets for overland conveyance, storage, purification, and so on. I just wanted to also key into one thing that the study document also noted when it was presented to council in 2018. The fact that policy outcomes would be leveraged to develop stormwater management policy. A policy framework integrating municipal natural assets will ensure that the value of municipal services provided by natural assets is recognized, protected wherever possible, and even potentially restored to achieve the benefits of green infrastructure over gray. I'll skip over financial considerations, and could we please proceed to slide 20? We see this as an opportunity. We believe that Lakeshore Road has wide, often paved shoulders. Improvements can be made to repave the road, add bike lanes, and it can be done within the existing road deck. Sidewalks and recreational path already exist. Let's retain what we have, work to fill in the gaps. Our commitment to the environment shows that the loss of trees for a project such as this is not acceptable. The proposal does not conserve, preserve, or maintain our scenic corridor. In fact, it does just the opposite, and it doesn't reflect Council's 2018 motion. Last slide, please. So our suggestion is that we turn the page and we retire this assessment. We believe that it has seen its day, it's outdated, it doesn't reflect our community desire or our official plan policies to preserve a valuable scenic corridor. Save the trees, pave the road, add bike lanes, and do it within the existing road deck. Let's be leaders. We have an outstanding opportunity here to make Oakville a showplace for green, natural infrastructure. Let's use our natural green assets as our starting place and create a system-wide stormwater plan that makes green a first choice, not gray. Thank you for the added time.
Thank you for your information, Ms. Knight. Council, do you have questions for the delegation? Ms. Knight, thank you very much for being available and bringing us your information. Madam Clerk, would you bring us the next delegation, please?
Next delegation is Chris Wasik. Chris, are you there?
I think I'm rejoining.
Welcome, Mr. Wasik. Council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. This is pretty neat. This is my first time doing anything remotely political, so thank you for the opportunity to discuss this issue. I'm a Bronte resident and father of 3 kids, age 8, 5, and 3. And like most parents of young kids, I'm usually too busy with family issues to get involved in anything political. But I heard so much negativity around the redevelopment that I felt it was my duty to at least present a different opinion that supports the addition of active transit infrastructure. I've read over the materials and even watched part of a council session on YouTube about the Midtown redevelopment to see what I was getting into here. And I was really encouraged to see some members of the council recognize the importance of density, livability, pedestrian-oriented design, and active transit. As I'm sure you know, cities that are rated the happiest in the world are among the highest in active transit use, and it's great to see Oakville prioritize livable communities and active transit. I'm definitely not a cycling nut, and I don't cycle unless my kids make me, but I love being able to go places and do everyday errands without a car. That's part of the reason my family moved to Bronte. The lake is beautiful, and it has a great mixed-use community feel with walkable shops. One weekend last year, my wife, kids, and I biked over to Kerr Street one day for a pandemic change of scenery. We had some playtime in Trafalgar Park and had lunch at Angry Pirates. My eldest son was 7, and he biked by himself 8 kilometers there and 8 kilometers back, while I pulled my 4- and 2-year-old in a bike trailer. We biked up to Rebecca and then over from there on the multi-use path. When we got to 4th line, the multi-use path disappeared, so we biked on the sidewalk to stay safe. The sidewalk was very narrow, and we decided not to do it again. But we're apparently slow learners, and again this year we decided to bike to Trafalgar Park, and again we were discouraged. So 2 weeks later, as things were opening up from the pandemic, we decided to go to Kerr Village again for some treats, but decided to drive as the infrastructure past Fourth Line was just not viable to cycle with kids. So I'm pleased to see that Oakville is considering some big improvements along Lakeshore, but was discouraged to see that the multi-use path was not a preferred option along the Block 4 stretch. So I wanted to go over 3 things: the benefits of multi-use path, why a multi-use path is so important, particularly in Block 4, and of course, what about the trees? So the biggest benefit of separated cycling infrastructure and multi-use paths is safety. People will use proper safe infrastructure even in the winter, like Montreal is discovering with its Réseau Express Vélo network. If Oakville wants to increase active transit use, it needs to be safe. It's not only a safety issue though, it's also an equity and inclusion issue. On-street bike lanes are okay for experienced riders, but they do not provide a safe, inclusive place for other, more cautious cyclists. I would not feel comfortable letting a 12-year-old use an on-road bike lane next to cars that speed by at 70 kilometers an hour where there's no protection. Even the materials for this meeting mention this, saying that the multi-use path is a safe space for families, commuter cyclists, and recreational cyclists to travel by foot or bike. That implies that on-road cycling lanes are not safe for everybody. According to Stats Canada's Cycling in Canada report on April 19, people identifying as women cycled less than those identifying as men, and they cited safety from traffic as the reason. In fact, only about 1/3 of cyclists in Canada are women, and this is pretty common in low cycling countries that don't provide safe infrastructure for casual riders. In countries that do provide infrastructure where cyclists are separated from traffic, women actually take a greater number of bike trips than men, like in the Netherlands, Denmark, and Germany. The most important part about an accessible, equitable bike lane network for casual users is that they're safe, and painted lines on a road simply aren't safe for people other than the most daring and confident cyclists. Separated bike lanes and multi-use paths are far more equitable and inclusive. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is why the multi-use path is so important between Fourth Line and Dorval in Block 4. In Blocks 2 and 3, there's an existing east-west multi-use path along the Rebecca to the north. It's somewhat close by, but in Block 4, there's no other alternative. The multi-use path along Rebecca stops at Fourth Line, just as the preferred plan does here for Block 4. Block 4 is arguably the most important segment to have a multi-use path simply because there's no other alternatives in South Oakville, not on Rebecca and not on Spears. I mean, it almost makes me wonder what the point is of having a multi-use path in Blocks 2 and 3 if there isn't one in Block 4. The whole purpose of the network is to be able to get to where you're going safely, and if you can't connect to the existing multi-use network along Dorval, then it's like a trail to nowhere. A multi-use path in Block 4 would make it possible to go all the way from downtown Burlington up the Centennial Bikeway Trail, east on Rebecca and Lakeshore, then up Dorval, and all the way over to 9th Line. We can always connect downtown Burlington and Mississauga in a safe way. And that's the benefit of a network, allowing people to connect and get to where they need to go. The only piece that's missing now is that multi-use path between Fourth Line and Dorval in Block 4. A full multi-use path on the segment of Lakeshore would form a full east-west link that joins Bronte with Kerr Village and almost over to downtown Oakville. Those are the main growth areas in South Oakville, and we have the potential to connect them in a safe, accessible, and equitable active transit corridor. It would finally live up to its name of the Waterfront Trail, which the signs like to advertise. It would also benefit the 3 schools located along Block 4. St. Thomas Aquinas and Appleby College are right on Lakeshore, while W.H. Borden is a block further north. There is a small on-road bike lane right in front of St. Thomas Aquinas, but it only goes for 1 block west. There's no way to get to it because it doesn't connect to anything. When my kids get to high school, I would love for them to be able to bike, but it's not safe on the road. If we want to encourage a healthy lifestyle for almost 3,000 kids attending those schools daily, a multi-use path along Block 4 would provide them with a safe way to get to school. It would be helpful for local businesses too. Additional transit options will help bring more people into the Bronte and Kerr Village areas, in addition to making the areas more active and livable. But everything comes at a cost, and as has been voiced previously, trees would need to be removed, and that's a fair concern. Oakville often goes to extreme lengths to protect its trees. Trees are great and provide many benefits. Health benefits, ecological benefits, and they're simply enjoyed by the residents. But in this case, those benefits are far outweighed by the advantages that a multi-use path can provide. The case for the direct health benefits of cycling and active transit have been made in numerous studies. It's low impact, does not require high levels of physical skill. It can be done at any intensity by people aged 5 years old to over 100, and the direct health benefits are numerous, but I won't reiterate them here. Trees also provide health benefits. The average mature tree removes 22 kilograms of carbon dioxide a year. That's impressive. If all 122 trees along Block 4 are removed, that would be a loss of almost 3 tons of carbon dioxide captured each year. But cars also cause significant pollution that cycling reduces. When my kids and I drove to Kerr Village, it's about 8 kilometers each way. The average passenger car emits about 250 grams of carbon dioxide per kilometer, or about 4 kilometers for our trip. And that's a lot too. Our one small car trip emitted about 20% of all the carbon dioxide that a mature tree can capture in a whole year. Cars pollute. Put another way, if the multi-use path is used by just 2 people a day, it provides more ecological benefits than all 122 trees combined that would be removed. Just 2 people a day. And that's not even counting the benefits that would be gained by planting replacement trees. Given that the active transportation master plan said that area saw an average of 360 trips per day, it seems trivial to think that we couldn't add just 2 more trips given safe and inclusive infrastructure. That's about a 0.5% increase. The stress output is just 2 additional riders a day. It's better for air quality and better to fight climate and carbon emissions to remove all the trees and build the multi-use path. And it's not like the lack of trees is permanent. While money doesn't grow on trees, one thing that literally does is trees. While urban trees have a long life, nothing lasts forever. Pulling forward the date when the trees would need to start being replaced is a small price to pay in exchange for the huge benefits that a multi-use path would create. Given that Health's plan is for at least 50% densification to occur in developed areas by 2051, we need to provide safe alternative transit options to support that growth. A separated multi-use path is safe for everybody. On-road bike lanes are next to speeding traffic or not. The other reason I think people are concerned about trees is simply because they're beautiful and enjoyable. And in general, I support protecting and caring for trees in our parks and green spaces. But I would ask people to consider what it means to say that Lakeshore is scenic. It's not a rural country road. Lakeshore is a paved minor arterial road, heavily used by commuters, lined with houses, and subjected to more than a century of continuous use. And a multi-use path will bring its own benefits, not only for the people using it, but it will also improve the area for all residents through improved transit options and reductions in atmospheric pollution. I know that change is always difficult, but the benefits of a multi-use path along Lakeshore are immense. We can get rid of the sidewalk on the south side in Block 4 if needed, like in Block 3, but please add in the multi-use path on Block 4 to make active transit safe for everyone. The multi-use path is good for the happiness of the people here. It will make the area more active, it will be good for our health, good for the air quality and environment, and provide safe, equitable, and inclusive transit options for students and residents, and help make South Oakville even more livable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wizik. You did a great job of staying within the 10 minutes, and Council appreciates that. Council, do you have questions for Mr. Wizik? Mr. Wizik, thank you for coming and bringing your take on this. And Madam Clerk, would you please call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Dane Morrison, representing the Oakville Cycling Club.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Great.
Welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Sorry, just give me 1 second. It changed everything on my screen. Okay, there we go. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak tonight. I'll try to keep it very brief. I think we're already hearing a common theme that people would like to have continuous cycling infrastructure on Lakeshore with minimal tree loss. What I'm going to show you is possibly a way to get a multi-use trail in Section 4, keep the impervious area change down to a minimal amount, reduce the amount of land that you have to buy, which would be a very good accomplishment. Briefly, the Oakville Cycling Club is a club with over 450 members, over 25% female, and we have an average age of over 50. We're more of a social club. We respect Oakville's single file rule and hold our over 500 annual rides outside Oakville where side-by-side riding is allowed. We do not travel 5 or 6 wide. We are not the groups of cyclists that you see throughout Oakville that annoy everyone, including myself. We care about what happens in Oakville. As individually and with our families, we use Oakville cycling infrastructure extensively. We love trees, but we need to make Lakeshore safe. As we all are probably aware, we have already lost 1 cyclist in the recent past on this stretch of road. And as the previous speaker just mentioned, even if we had to cut down 100 mature trees, that's only equivalent to about the carbon that you would save from 1 average Canadian car in a year. It does not have a lot of environmental impact to remove trees, but we would like to keep that to a minimum. If we really want to save the planet, build the infrastructure to enable more bicycle trips, get people out of cars, and use some of the savings from what we propose to reforest Oakville's open areas. So our proposal, we like the preferred solution, but no multi-use trail in section 4 is the equivalent of building a bridge to nowhere. Our proposal could also save approximately $2 million, and we get there by narrowing the bike lanes and multi-use trail to fit in the same space as bike lanes only. As the first group mentioned, we see what is proposed for section 1 as it's a great plan. We would not suggest anything to it. In section 2, 3, and 4, instead of a 3-meter wide multi-use trail, and 2.3 meter bike lanes, we would suggest that we narrow the bike lanes to 1.85 meters and to allow a 2.4 meter continuous multi-use trail in sections 2, 3, and 4. This has the same impacts as bike lanes only on Lakeshore with sidewalks on each side. In sections 2, 3, and 4, this reduces the mature tree loss, healthy tree loss, from about 53 trees down to 27. The impervious area increase falls from 5,600 square meters to 350 meters square, and land acquisition falls from 349 meters square to approximately 20 meters square. It should also be significantly less costly to build, as the roadway would be about 8% narrower. Just from a cycling perspective, a 1.85 meter bike lane on Lakeshore would still provide sufficient safety, especially with the 0.5 meter buffer, and it's better than many other existing bike lanes that we have in the town of Oakville. For reference purposes, on Lakeshore, west of Mississauga Street, the existing bike lanes are only 1.3 meters wide, and on Lakeshore east of Dorval, they're only 1.5 meters wide. So going to 1.85 still gives us acceptable levels of safety. And a 2.4 multi-use trail is allowable in the roadbook guidelines, as it provides 1.2 meters for a cyclist traveling in each direction. Sorry, I'm not asking to go to slides, so you're not seeing the slides. I'm now on section, that was slide number 5. And if we can just flip to slide number 6. I have some questions for staff, and I'd ask staff to address the questions that I have in this slide. You can read them yourself. I'll let them answer them. I won't read them out myself. Please go ahead.
The way this works, the staff don't answer delegations. These questions may be of interest to councillors to ask of staff later. And
okay.
So
you
can proceed.
So, sorry, I was given the wrong information on that. I thought I would be able to ask questions of staff during this this meeting.
The councillors will.
So what I'd ask you to
ask
of staff is, will this approach encourage more active trips by having a continuous multi-use trail through section 4 and still have sufficient safety, furthering the town's goals? Will this approach save more trees, and will putting the multi-use trail in the north side save more as well? Will this approach have essentially the same impacts as bike lanes only? And will this plan have substantial savings, and how big could the replacement trees be? And I had hoped to engage staff in a little bit of a conversation, but as I cannot, that's the end of my proposal. I hope that you do consider it. It's a way to, I think, get more of what the community is asking for. It gets a multi-use trail in section 4. It reduces the tree loss to probably less than 30 in that section. It can save you, a significant amount of funds, which is a good thing. The final thing that I'd ask is, please do not delay this any further, and please approve at least bicycle lanes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your information and your novel suggestions. And I certainly appreciate the very interesting tweaks to what has been put out in public with the references to the other bike lanes in other places. That's very, very effective reference. And Madam Clerk, would you please call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Brian Hassett.
Welcome, Mr. Hassett. Council looks forward to your information.
Can you see me and hear me?
We can hear you and see you.
Oh, goody. Hi, everybody. Thanks for doing this. It was so great to see all of the counselors' faces up close. We should do this whenever it's safe. We should have one of these things in person so that we can, kind of meet and handshake and get to know our town councilors better. This is the closest I've ever gotten to, well, at least 10 of you. I'm in Bronte Village. Family been here 30 years. So that's kind of largely what I'm addressing. And, I know this is what did they say, 4 or 6 kilometer stretch that's being improved. But Bronte Village is sort of the hit single of this album you guys are creating called Lakeshore Improvement. And so I hope that the town council and the planners look to it this is where you want to have the wow moment, where you want people to, their eyes to pop. And it's also where our tax revenues come from. Like, it's people coming here and spending money in all these different really cool shops, from Squish a House to my girlfriend's closet to the cappuccino place on Bronte and Cove and Plank and all these great places we've got. That this is where it's being the energy is being generated along that whole strip. It's where the people are coming from all over Oakville, Halton, Toronto, the country, to come here and into the village is really our show place. So that's what I hope that the planners and council give special attention to Bronte Village, because this is the show place. And I also wanted to compliment the opening woman's presentation. Didn't catch her name, but that was fantastic. And I thought Pamela Knight did a great job on the trees, and I totally dug this Dane Morrison just before us on the importance of the cycling paths and how they can, in fact, be narrowed. Here's a cyclist guy saying that you don't need that entire width if even the cyclists themselves know that they can have a slightly slimmer lane if it means preserving some of these trees. And, also to the point about those trees along by before you get to third line there, you can't cut those down, man. The city has got such strong, bylaws about what trees can come down, and then suddenly the city is talking about taking down, some people counted 100 red circles on that line, and especially those mature trees along there. There's got to be a way to fix that. You can't take those big old trees down. So that should really be, an important thing that's stressed. And that sort of leads to a question, which I guess I can't get an answer from unless, Mayor Burton, you can answer me, is that on that proposal that was, presented to the public, I counted 30 red circles around trees in Bronte Village. And then I heard from a counselor that, well, they're not all definitely going to be coming down. So my question is, Mayor, if you can answer it, is why would they put red circles around these trees, which people don't want to cut down, if you're not planning to cut them down?
As staff have explained, this stage at the EA level is conceptual, and those red circles identify trees that we would have to work to save by making whatever adjustments are necessary by the width of the roadway, the park, the multi-use trail, the bike lane, the sidewalk, whatever. So and in the staff presentation that we began the meeting with, that number of trees of concern has been reduced through the many years of this work to 60 now.
Okay, all right, well, great. It was a little, then that's a little misleading if the thing that you presented to the public, I believe in early April, had 100 trees. So I don't, how we're supposed to give accurate feedback if the proposal that's presented in the PDF posted online is, already changed or is not accurate. So I think that's an issue. I love that Silva cells have been brought up. You plant a tree below the surface and put a metal grate above the top where the rainwater can run in. My concern is, if that proposal you presented to the public in early April is accurate, I only counted 7 Silva cells coming in Bronte Village. This is a place where there should be 30 of them. They should be all along the street, especially on the north side. There's no tree cover. So I don't know what, and we've been talking a lot about drainage and rainwater runoff and all that, this storm water stuff. These are great for that. I had a little hill in my front yard, and just this pandemic spring, I took that hill out because the rainwater was running off it onto my driveway, onto the sidewalk, and just causing the water to run away. I flattened that, and now the rainwater stays in the lawn. So the more of this that we can be creating, I mean, almost inch by inch, yard by yard, why, this was a question, I guess nobody can answer it online, maybe after I'm done or something, but why are there not more Silva cells of planted trees, kind of all the way along in the village? Because this is where people drive their cars, hopefully they don't get towed, maybe that's another council meeting, but that they want to walk along the streets here. And we got a few very spindly, not growing very much trees. And if we put in some good, healthy, mature as the town can afford, trees, all, I don't know, 5 a block, eat both sides of the street, that's going to help with the drainage. It's going to, kind of, I think the town should have a rule, its own little council internal bylaw, that for every tree that the town takes out, it plants another one. I don't think that's an unreasonable idea. However many trees you plan to take out of Bronte Village, you should put in the same number of Silva cells along both sides of these 3 blocks, which are the 3 blocks that, kind of sell Bronte. And, I kind of predict in the future is going to sell Oakville. I think this is kind of where things are going to happen. And, Joni Mitchell said a long time ago, don't pave paradise and put up a parking lot. So let's put in more paradise, and less pavement, if that's okay with any of you. And nobody has mentioned the pedestrian crosswalks, that on that plan, and again, all I know is what that PDF told me are your plans. And there was this new pedestrian crosswalk in the middle of every block. And this is insane. I live right here. I'm looking at that street out my window here. We don't have a rabid jaywalking problem in Bronte Village. And we've already, as taxpayers and city planners, put in these excellent lights with crosswalks and hand signals and little buttons you can push at every intersection. We're trying to get people to exercise. Why cater to laziness to have people not walk 100 feet right or left to an intersection to cross the darn street? Is my thinking about that. And that people already complain about traffic here. which I don't really think is terrible, but there's lots of times where there's just an awful lot of cars going both directions on Lakeshore. And if you put in another stop gap so that every lazy person who wants to go from McDonald's over to Tim Hortons and doesn't want to walk to the corner hits that button, that stops traffic in both directions every time. And we want the traffic to flow through. If they're coming to park, great, but we don't want to be causing more long lines of cars stopping every 100 feet for a pedestrian crossing. So
Thank you,
I don't know who came up with these ideas, but they're not neat, this particular idea. But,
Mr. Hassett?
it's not.
Mr. Hassett, thank you
Yeah.
very much. You've used up your time. Were you
Okay.
about done?
Well, the one other thing I wanted to just throw at you guys was, I didn't realize, thank you for that, is that on that PDF, at the very bottom of it, you put, your input is important. If you have any questions, please contact, and then these two guys' names, Syed Razivi and Bob Felker. And I sent them a question, I sent them comments, and never heard back. So I would think that, so I would think that on these things, when you ask people for comments or questions, have people's email addresses at the end who are going to respond to residents, and don't put people's names there who are not going to respond. That would be a
Well,
final
I
suggestion.
thank you for your information. I apologize for the issue that you weren't responded to. That's inconsistent with what council wants to happen. But thank you very much for your contributions
Okay, can you
tonight.
just tell us, what is that? You talk about a future monument in front of the pizza. Any idea what that's going to be?
Mr. Hassett, I know, and let's, part of running a meeting is trying to stay on topic. So
Okay, all right.
thank you very much for coming and sharing your thoughts. Madam Clerk, would you please call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Chris Bradbrook.
Welcome, Mr. Bradbrook. Council looks forward to your information.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Okay, welcome. Thanks very much. I'll attempt to win you some time back. I'll be brief. Anyway, thank you for providing the opportunity to appear as a delegate. It's much appreciated. I have a few points I wish to make, but as I said, I'll endeavour to be brief. And just to let you know where I live opposite Coronation Park. My first point is, with growing concern about climate change, it could be regarded as foolhardy to cut down approximately 100 trees to lay down asphalt. All Canadians will be aware of the effects of climate change with the recent and ongoing devastating fires in British Columbia. It should be a priority of our town to do what we can to mitigate the effects of climate change. Keeping and planting trees does this, cutting them down does not. Lakeshore Road is identified in Liverpool Oakville as a scenic corridor with policies that support its conservation and preservation of character. The preferred solution does not do this. The January 2020 Scenic Corridor Study noted the first two key themes as the importance of maintaining trees and vegetation and the importance of maintaining and complementing the historical attributes. The preferred solution does not do this. The preferred solution is recommended the removal of the maximum number of trees from blocks 2 and 3, despite there being 2 other more tree-friendly options. It's the tree canopy that gives the area its appeal and brings visitors who enjoy the countryside feel. This urbanisation proposal does not fit with that reality. Lakeshore Road West is an extremely attractive part of Oakville. Let's keep it that way. Let's keep the trees. Anyone who's ever planted a tree knows how long it takes for them to grow. If 100 trees were cut down, it would take an extremely long time to regrow the canopy. It appears the insistence on a multi-use path is what is causing the loss of trees in the preferred solution. Of the 194 comments provided by the public, 60% specifically said they did not want trees cut down. while less than 10% said they liked the plan, and less than 5% specifically requested a multi-use path. I mean, there may be other opinions, but that's what I read from the responses. If the preferred solution goes forward, it will clearly go against what the majority of residents have said they want. It's impossible to see how this is making Oakville greener. Any residential construction has to protect trees at the residents' cost. I would hope council applies the same standards to itself regarding the options available. The removal of so many trees will have a negative impact on wildlife in the area. Even during this pandemic, remember I live in the area where people have been enjoying the outdoors. As someone who walks and cycles in the area regularly, I could say that pedestrian traffic is very light. Most people go straight to Coronation Park. Residents in the Coronation Park area have had to endure around 4 years of construction in the park when a new stormwater outlet was installed, despite being told it would take 2 years. This proposal would see major construction for a prolonged period, which experience shows would likely take longer than estimated. Why does this have to be inflicted on the area? The estimated cost of $40.5 million from 2019 is now outdated, so probably an underestimate. And as with any capital project, has the potential for cost overruns. The estimate does not even include the Mississauga Street to East Street section. Why are we considering so much taxpayer expense as we come out of the pandemic and the negative economic impact it continues to have? Simple resurfacing of the existing road and adding on-road bike lanes would be a far less invasive and cost-effective solution. Finally, I would note the very public efforts that the town are making to prevent development of the Glengarry Abbey Golf Course and preserve its heritage. I hope council expends the same efforts to preserve the heritage of Lakeshore Road West, of which the tree canopy is undoubtedly part. Thank you once again, and I sincerely hope you take all comments into consideration when making your decision.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bradbrook, for the economy of your words and their pointedness. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Adriana Serafini, representing the Youth Climate Change Association of Oakville.
Ms. Serafini, welcome. Council looks forward to the information that you and your colleagues in the Youth Climate Change Association of Oakville have to offer us.
Hi, is my mic okay?
We're hearing you very well.
Perfect, thanks. Your Worship and members of Council, my name is Adriana Serafini, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the executive members of the Youth Climate Change Association of Oakville, who are Maytako 9, Abigail Camery, Lords David, and our advisor, who is former MPP and Councillor Kevin Flynn. We have been given a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reconstruct Lakeshore Road. It is very important we take advantage of this opportunity to fix the road's previous imperfections, considering all environmental aspects. As the Youth Climate Change Association of Oakville, we advocate for more serious action when dealing with the climate crisis here in Oakville. We are determined to ensure that as a community we can make a difference. Firstly, in our opinion, bike lanes should not be included in the road unless they have a physical barrier separating them from the road. This quote was taken from the Oakville Scenic Corridor Agenda Package. On-road bike lanes with a buffer provides separation between cars and bicycles compared to the existing road conditions for cyclists. This quote shows irresponsibility from the town of Oakville. Our reasoning behind this is because bike lanes that are equipped with a simple painted buffer are very unsafe, especially for children and families. The buffer gives absolutely no protection against cars on the road. This is also especially relevant on Lakeshore Road as package. Lakeshore Road is the highest used corridor for cycling and pedestrian use in all of Oakville. This backs up the need for a proper bike path on the road. Proper and safe bike paths will also encourage citizens to bike more, which benefits the environment. If proper bike lanes were added to the road, it would have the citizens of Oakville in the environment's best interests at heart. Secondly, in the preferred blueprint for the road, it states that there will be 123 trees removed as opposed to the previous 300. This is a great improvement, but it is not enough. We believe that if 1 tree is removed to build a new road, there should be 5 more planted in its place to neutralize the carbon emissions that were created. There should also be little tree loss as possible when multi-use paths are installed. This will make up for the increased impervious area created by the multi-use paths. Finally, we need to consider the wildlife when reconstructing this road. This is the perfect time to assess the land and install wildlife paths and tunnels without the extra cost of having to rip up the road since it's already happening. To conclude, we need to take this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reconstruct Lakeshore Road and do it right, and we know you will take our ideas into consideration. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And I think your group is onto something, and it's good to see youth organized around helping us fight climate change. Madam Clerk, would you please call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Janet Stevenson.
Ms. Stevenson, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Okay, I think I'm online now. Thanks for the opportunity, members, for myself to speak. Can I get a thumbs up or something that somebody's hearing me?
We can hear you.
I too am a rookie at speaking at any meeting as such, as I've never done so before. But I felt compelled to speak and be heard, I hope, about the value of our trees. I feel that we as human beings are not respecting human nature or the nature, and we should be treating these gifts as with gratitude. Climate change is a real thing, and we have a privilege and a right, and with those things come responsibilities. We have responsibility to preserve those trees. We have responsibility to preserve heritage. And as a woman cyclist, I would never assume that my privilege trumps that of any tree. So I'm hearing many wonderful ideas being put on the table. And I just do not hear that from the presentation. I think that these ideas, like someone said previously, are old hat. These are not current. They are not acceptable. And the loss of one mature tree here is not acceptable to me. And I know that I speak for others. And that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Well, thank you for spending your 2 cents with us and for making it so economical. And appreciate your intervention, and you'll always be welcome in future council meetings. So you did a fine,
thank
you did a fine job for your first outing. Madam Clerk, would you please call the next delegation?
Yes, the next delegation is Bill Kay.
Really? Welcome, Mr. Key. And please feel free to correct me if I don't say it correctly. Council looks forward to your information.
I see. Thanks very much to Mayor Burton and Town Council. I'm really excited to be here tonight. Thanks very much for having me. I'm going to try and keep my presentation short, and I'm going to edify it kind of as we go, because the speakers have been great so far, and I don't want to repeat what's already been said. You know, I didn't know where I was going to speak in the order of things. So, anyways, could we go to the? Oh, first of all, my presentation is called "Think Globally and Act Locally," and I know you've all probably heard that expression many times. I first heard it when I was graduating from University of Guelph. The president of the school said this to the graduating class, and he said, when we're graduating, you know, to use our degree, put it to good use, do good things with it, and to think globally and act locally. So I always remembered that expression. So I thought it applied to us in this case. So could we go to the next slide, please? I grew up in Coronation Park area, I went to Thomas A. Blakelock and Woodside Public School, which is now Patricia Picknell and Brookdale. I did a lot of cycling when I was in Oakville, and I cycled to the Oakville Canoe Club. I was a member there, which is now the Burlow Canoe Club. And I walked, I ran, I've basically used many different kinds of transportation across Oakville, and I've been safe so far, as touch wood. So after I went to University of Guelph, after Guelph, I moved to Malaysia, and I taught at an overseas school there. And on the right, you could see, this is what my presentation was about. When I was living there, there was the Indonesians were slashing and burning the rainforests. And for about 6 to 8 months while I was living there, there was smog in the air. We couldn't see the sun, which is kind of strange considering that Malaysia's right on the equator and we couldn't see the sun. So it was, the peat was burning and it just filled the air. It was very tough to breathe. So there's a lot of things going on globally that are against trees for many different reasons. The Indonesians were slashing and burning the forests so that they could plant more palm oil trees because they export a lot of palm oil. So that was their reasoning behind it. Next slide, please. Also, we need to think nationally and provincially. Currently in British Columbia, old growth forests are being logged. There's currently only 3 or 4% of old growth trees still available, still around. There's massive, there's forest fires in BC and Saskatchewan and Alberta, as we all know. Can we go to the next slide, please? And we can think regionally. This area, as councillors know, and I want to thank you all for your time tonight, because this is an evening that you're spending away from your family. So I wanted to thank you for that. But the region, in town of Oakville, we've lost a lot of golf courses over the years. Like when I grew up, there was Lido Golf Course, it's gone. Richview, I actually worked at Richview as on the groundskeeping staff, and it's gone. Sawwet's now gone, and now some of the lands are still, like in the creeks, are still fine. But we've lost a lot of land, and in the future, as we know, Glen Abbey, the town's doing a great job trying to save Glen Abbey, so I want to thank you for that. But there are a lot of permits pulled across the town for private building and also engineering projects. And it seems like in Coronation Park and East Oakville and in Bronte, there's construction is constant. And I know that you probably don't need to hear that because you are the town of Oakville passes these permits, but it's continuous. And it kind of adds to the stress of living in Oakville, which is a beautiful place. And I'm very, very thankful to have grown up here and definitely feel the need to give back. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I'm a realtor with RE/MAX About Town, and I wanted to get to this part of my presentation. Trees do add value to properties. Obviously, private properties is what I'm talking about at the moment. That's kind of, homeowners know this to be true, and it's kind of inherent. And so what I'd like to do is let's go to the next slide, please. Right here, you can see some of the property value, the benefits of trees to property values. Add privacy, improves life, saves energy, and is visually interesting. Can we go to the next slide, please? Again, another study about this from the University of Washington. There's lots of information online about how trees add the value to properties, but also they can add the value to communities as well. Could we go to the next slide, please? So we've been thinking throughout this presentation about the global impact of logging and environmental impacts of progress nationally, provincially, locally, and now we get the time to act locally. So I can't go out to BC and protest the old growth logging is although I don't want it to happen. And I can't go to Indonesia and protest this slashing and burning that's going on there. And it's been going on every year since I've lived there. I lived there and I came back to Canada just prior to the Commonwealth Games in '98. But since then, they've continued to do it. What I can do is act locally and get involved with discussions like this. And could we go to the next slide, please? So basically, I've learned tonight that it's down to like 60 trees. So we can honor our past residents by voting this down, and respect the current residents of Oakville in Coronation Park and Bronte area, preserve the trees and the area for future residents and visitors. So, as you know, I'm a realtor. So if you've got any questions about how it impacts real estate in Oakville, I'd be glad to answer them. I do know when I'm working with clients, when they're buying in Oakville, they're always talking about the different areas, and different areas have different features. And Coronation Park is really well known for larger lots, sizes, and tree-lined streets. Same with Bronte and East Oakville, compared to the newer subdivisions that are being built, like north of Dundas, and in other places where there's newer homes, they're shinier, but the lots are smaller, and there's not a lot of trees around. So buyers compare these areas, and they're always considering the trade-offs of which area is the best for them to live in. So there's a minute or so on my presentation left. Does anybody have any questions at all for me that I could help them with?
Thank you, Mr. Key.
Okay.
If it's okay with
Yield
you,
back
I'll
the
chair the
time.
meeting.
You're welcome, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for having me. I'll yield back my time to other speakers.
Well, thank you very much. It's a lovely parliamentary phrase, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much for bringing your information. Especially enjoyed the global perspective. And Madam Clerk, would you please call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Joanne Robbins.
Welcome, Ms. Robbins. Council looks forward to your information.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you very well, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, first of all, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight and to express my views, and I will be brief. To make sure I'm going to be brief, I'm actually going to read from my notes. First of all, I'd just like to say that I appreciate that a lot of work goes into the planning that has been done. I don't want to diminish that, but I also want to implore you to reconsider the plan and to put conservation ahead of development. I'm going to probably reiterate a few things lots of things others have said tonight, so it's just to add volume to those voices. The importance of conserving existing and mature trees cannot be understated from a variety of perspectives, including the mitigation of climate change and the preservation of Oakville's treasured tree canopy. When viewed from either of these lenses, destruction of existing healthy trees is quite simply reckless and irresponsible. Climate change is a real and increasingly imminent threat that demands our immediate and urgent attention. While it's difficult and challenging at times for everybody, we must collectively learn to make better choices for the sake of the environment, choices that consistently prioritize the environment over profits, and in this case, convenience and development. We can't shrug off accountability under the pretense that we're only one town, one small town in the big global picture, and try to pass this off as somebody else's responsibility. In order for the world to make the changes that are necessary to keep global warming at the Paris Agreement's level of 1.5 to 2 degrees of global warming, we have to all work together. We all know that living trees remove carbon from the atmosphere. In addition to this, destroying trees releases stored carbon into the atmosphere, so it's actually a double whammy. And given these facts, how can you possibly justify the removal of these healthy trees for what feels like, to a lot of residents, including myself, it just feels like yet another construction project? According to the town of Oakville's tree protection and tree canopy preservation policy, and I quote, "The corporation of the town of Oakville is committed to preserve and enhance its tree canopy and natural vegetation. The town shall protect trees on both public and private lands pursuant to applicable bylaws, recognizing their importance to the ecology, aesthetics, culture, and heritage of the town," end quote. So it appears very hypocritical from my point of view for a town that seemingly commits to protection and preservation to intentionally destroy healthy trees. I'd like to add that in no way does the replanting of smaller trees make up for the loss of healthy, mature trees. Not from a climate change mitigation perspective, and not from the perspective of this residents who chose to live in South Oakville 20 years ago because of the mature trees. And as was mentioned earlier tonight, it does take 20 to 40 years to see the benefits of planting new trees, and I'm sure people on the panel tonight already understand we don't have 20 to 40 years if we're going to avoid the climate disaster that's waiting for us. So just to wrap this up, I'm hoping that you'll reconsider and realign your priorities to be more environmentally responsible and consistent with the stewardship ideals that are stated in the town's own policy. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your information. Madam Clerk, could you call the next delegation?
Next delegation is Douglas McCurgan, representing Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association.
Welcome, Mr. McCurgan. Council looks forward to your information.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
We hear you quite well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, councillors. I'm here this evening on behalf of the Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association, and I'm going to read from the letter that we sent to the town clerk to address to the mayor and members of council, and I'll make a couple of extemporaneous comments as I go. The Trafalgar Chartwell Residents Association, TCRA, opposes staff's recommendations: A, that the Lakeshore Road West environmental study be concluded, and B, that the preferred solution concept proposed in the EA be approved and taken to detailed design. We understand that in opposing staff's recommendations, we are challenging professionals whose knowledge and experience are indisputable, and for whom we have the utmost respect. Nevertheless, we feel compelled to register our discomfort with a chain of logic which takes us to a place where we are considering radical changes to 6 kilometers of Lakeshore Road West. In our opinion, these changes will result in the permanent loss of something very precious to the whole of Oakville. This paragraph captures our key conviction. We think that the end result of the preferred solution concept put forward by staff today will be the irretrievable loss of something special, something quirky, something beautiful. Obviously, the preferred concept will deliver a safer, more efficient, more accessible road. But it will no longer be an attraction, a road you want to drive down, cycle up, walk along. And I should say that one of my hobbies is long distance walking. And I have walked from my home on Trafalgar Road to Bronte, I don't know how many times, but it's part of what I do. Is walk there and have lunch and walk back. So I know the road very well. Lakeshore Road West has been designated by the town as a heritage scenic corridor. It connects Oakville's heritage downtown and historic Bronte Village. It is a popular and calming route for motorists, cyclists, and walkers. It is precisely because it curves and is full of mature trees and looks like a country road that it is so popular. It is an old road. Maintenance is required in places. Since we are planning maintenance, we should take the opportunity to improve safety at some intersections. And while we're at it, perhaps we should respond to the demand for continuous cycle lanes along its length. And what about stormwater management upgrades? And then, since we're doing major reconstruction, we must comply with Ontario's Accessibility Act and make the whole thing accessible and safe for wheelchairs, which means curbs and a 3-meter wide multi-use trail. Now, I've heard tonight that that's not accurate. That in fact, the multi-use trail is part of the response to the cyclists. But the essence of the thought is the same. Step by step, we arrive where we are, considering a project which will transform Lakeshore Road West into an urban thoroughfare like Rebecca, scenic no more. A project which will remove about 60 trees just when the public is beginning to understand the value of trees. What are we about? This paragraph, for us, addresses the crux of the issue. There's a group of things we want. We want bike lanes, heritage conservation, safety, tree preservation, and so on. And some of these are incompatible. We have to make choices. We stand for preserving, as much as possible, the road and its trees as they are now, and for only making those changes which are absolutely necessary. So the TCRA respectfully asks that Council direct reconsideration of the necessity of the separate elements of the preferred solution, such that we may retain our scenic Lakeshore Road West and its trees. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. McCurgan, for your presentation and your thoughtful comments. Madam Clerk, would you please call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Don Cox.
Mr. Cox, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Am I there?
You are here, and we hear you very well.
Okay. Thank you. Your Worship, councilors, thank you very much for the opportunity to comment on this proposal tonight. I will be brief as well, so it may give you some time back for other people. My wife and I wish to express our views for your consideration as you move to a decision on this incredibly significant project that would forever alter Lakeshore Road should it proceed. My wife, family, and I moved to Oakville in 1970, over 50 years ago, and we have lived at our current address on Old Lakeshore Road next to Coronation Park for the past 35 years. We've seen many changes occur in Oakville over that half century, some very good, and others, some would argue, not so good. One of the constants over that time has been Lakeshore Road West, and for good reason. It is an iconic part of what makes Oakville, Oakville. We enjoy its majestic tree corridor and rural feel that has taken many decades to mature to its present beautiful state and its rural feel within the town. It is more than a simple conveyance structure, and it is recognized by locals as well as visitors as something special, often referred to as a place rather than just an asphalt strip. It's part of Oakville's brand. Significant recent world-affecting events, has been mentioned just from the previous speaker, must also play a part in deciding the future of this proposal. Specifically, the quickly growing consensus that we really must do more to address climate change, to do more than just words and action plans and reports. Climate change is real. It's here right now. The Lakeshore Road Improvements Initiative provides the opportunity for Oakville to set an example of what it means to actually take meaningful action on climate change. We believe the responses to the recent survey conducted over a few days in April point the way to a more fitting solution. Like Chris indicated previously, he went through the commentary of those responses, as did I can tell he did. For the section of the route between East Street and 4th Line, the one that we tend to be talking about in the area I live in, my tally results based on commentary from respondents indicates approximately 75% are against this proposal and 25% are for this proposal. Of the 25% who support it, half mentioned bike lanes as one of the positive factors. There are also a few who, while supporting the proposal, did express concern over tree loss. So if you play with those numbers and take the people who are concerned about trees who also support it, and the people who are supportive of the proposal and have concerns about, because one of the concerns being bike lanes, those factors can be addressed without these urbanized roadway as proposed. These data, I believe, can rightly be interpreted as a strong signal from Oakville residents to not proceed any further with this proposal and to seek a solution that is focused on improving cyclist safety through the addition of bike lanes and fixing known road surface and drainage issues in a rural roadway setting. In other words, make the improvement on the basis of what the problems are, fix the problems. Such a solution would have the following advantages. It would eliminate the need for tree removal, not only stop growing the impervious layer, but actually reduce it from what exists today. And that is according to data that's in the consultant's report, it being possible. It would significantly reduce stormwater volumes into Lake Ontario through infiltration and absorption of roadway runoff versus the proposed plan, and improve quality of rainwater flowing into Lake Ontario versus the proposed plan. By way of comparison and to put into context, one effect of the, excuse me, I gotta find my other piece of paper here. To put in effect, let me start over. By way of comparison and to put into context, one effect of the proposed urban design versus a rural structure, I offer the following for your consideration. A rainfall of 25 millimeters on an impervious asphalt stretch of roadway, the width of Old Lakeshore Road and 5 kilometers long, which is approximately the distance from East Street to Dorval Drive, will deposit over 1 million liters of water on the roadway. An urban roadway will direct that rainwater runoff into storm sewers and then directly into Lake Ontario. A rural roadway will allow the water to be absorbed into the ground and treated naturally before a much smaller volume flows into Lake Ontario. In researching this topic to see if I could find any formulas that would indicate how much it would actually be reduced by. I couldn't find anything that I could substantiate, so I won't indicate what I think it might be, but it is extremely significant. In fact, the reduction was somewhat astounding, I found. Jill Stephen mentioned in her presentation, and I thank her for that the Lakeshore Road is actually not the problem in stormwater management. The problem seems to be the water that's flowing in that direction that has to be looked after. So I would mention this as a consideration in converting to a design that is not an urbanized design, but retain the rural structure that we have. For my wife and for me, the following response to the survey by one respondent tells this story, and I quote, "No, that's the whole sentiment, no. The canopy of those trees are exactly why anyone would want to travel down Lakeshore Road instead of any other street. To remove even one is to detract from the appeal that makes the improvements even necessary. Improvements in quotation marks. I've never commented on any proposal on anything in my life, but this was just so egregiously ridiculous, I had to do it. No." To summarize, we recommend you do not accept the recommendation to proceed, and further, we ask that you redirect the project to achieve a more suitable outcome, which we believe can be done in the rural setting by addressing the known problems on the roadway. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cox, for your information. Madam Clerk, would you call the next delegation?
The next delegation is Stephanie Bush, representing Halton Environmental Network.
Ms. Bush, welcome, and welcome to HEN, the Halton Environmental Network. Council looks forward to your information.
Hello, thank you for having me. Just making sure I'm all connected here.
We can hear you and we can see you.
There we go. Thank you so much for your time this evening. I've really enjoyed listening to the delegations. I'm just going to bring up my own notes so that I can proceed in a timely way. So, good evening, Mayor Burton, councillor, staff, and community members and delegates. My name is Stephanie Bush, and I am the Deputy Director at the Halton Environmental Network, and I'm also an Oakville resident. HEN would like to comment on this staff report as well. I want to thank you for allowing me this opportunity and for all of the work that you do as mayor, councillors, and town staff on mitigating climate change in our community. It goes without saying that HEN fully supports active transportation and encouraging safe spaces that will inspire our community to get out of their single-use combustible cars and onto their bikes, wheels, and into their walking shoes. We appreciate the staff report and their efforts in working on and preparing this important assessment. This updated report shows that they have listened to the community in regards to reducing the number of trees lost and incorporating more green infrastructure, adding low-impact development measures and active transportation routes. And for that, we are very grateful. We were also pleased to see the use of permeable pavers, infiltration trenches, bioretention systems, and enhanced grass bioswales. All welcome advancements and a more holistic plan moving forward. Low-impact development measures and conveyance infrastructure, such as storm pipes and curbs to direct overland flow routes, are very important as we prepare for our changing climate. The stormwater management report was also welcomed to ensure our resilience. All this being said, we do have some concerns about some specific trees that will be lost with this new report. We are concerned about a few large and mature trees that are slated for removal due to design, especially when you consider the ecological benefits of these trees to support climate action. We consulted with Dr. Andrew Millward, a program director and professor of geography and environmental studies at Ryerson University, for his input. His opinions are based on a simple visual inspection, so please keep this in mind. But he is a subject matter expert leading numerous initiatives, and with his amazing work at Ryerson University, we feel privileged to work with Dr. Millward, and his feedback should be noted. Dr. Millward has said, and I quote, "It appears that important negotiations have occurred to minimize tree loss. This is good. In my opinion, if you are seeking to argue for further preservation, you should focus on the large trees that have at least 20 to 25 years of life remaining. This would appear to be any of the large and healthy silver maples, the Norway spruce, and red oak. There are several sugar maple of a good size, but I cannot determine if they are in a possible removal area. Concerning the Norway maples, which are most abundant on the site, many are in poor shape, so I would only worry about protecting the best of those, also considering their invasive potential. Concerning replanting trees, I would work with the town to see if trees could be planted on front lawns of homes along Lakeshore, instead of replanting the boulevard. Such plantings have a much greater potential for success and opportunity to grow to maturity. Also, again, instead of replanting the boulevard, you may argue to have some of the new trees planted in parks or parkettes along Lakeshore. With similar logic, much higher chance of reaching maturity. My guiding principle concerning an established, large, and healthy native tree in an urban area is that it is more valuable than 100 newly planted trees. In most cases, I would argue this for a non-native tree too in the same context. Moreover, each new tree comes with many years of a carbon deficit related to excavation for planting, transport to site, and early maintenance. This latter point is always a good one to make when developers say, we will plant replacement trees, don't worry. So if a large, healthy native tree is to be removed, we need to ensure 100 caliper replacements. End of quote from Dr. Millward. This is now from Hen. Trees work hard. They absorb water, clean the air, provide shade, reduce erosion, flooding, and wind tunnels, and decrease heating and cooling costs. The mature trees that will be lost are a great and viable greenhouse gas sink. Greenhouse gas sinks refer to a process that can remove these gases from the atmosphere and store them somewhere else for long periods of time, thereby lowering the levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Typically, this process refers to the removal of carbon dioxide by land-based ecosystems and the ocean, although some sinks of methane also exist. On land, carbon dioxide is absorbed through photosynthesis and is later stored in living biomass, trees, for example, or as organic matter in the soil. Depending on the form of biomass or soil organic matter, this carbon can be stored on land, away from the atmosphere, for a season, several years, multiple decades, or several centuries. Ultimately, the carbon that is locked up in biomass or soil organic composition and microbial respiration. In order to mitigate climate change, we understand that we need to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Carbon sinks are a very helpful and needed climate solution. There are two approaches required to achieve this goal. We must lower greenhouse gas emissions, for example, from buildings and transportation, and also enhance carbon sinks on land, including these large, mature trees. We need a balanced approach that does not lead to further climate challenges, economic challenges, or issues with health, safety, and well-being in our communities. It is our hope that the Council will weigh the climate impacts of removing trees with great sequestration value, while still expanding active transportation lanes and adding low-impact development measures. Hearing tonight that there will be ongoing consideration to preserve more trees in the detailed design work, we hope that this process will weigh all climate actions to ensure a resilient and climate-ready community. Thank you again for the opportunity to delegate this evening.
Thank you very much for a very informative presentation. Madam Clerk, the next delegation, please.
The next delegation is Karen Brock from Oakville Green.
Ms. Brock, welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Hi there.
Hello. We see your presentation. We hear you well.
You can't see me for some reason. That's okay. Hello. Good evening, Mayor Burton, and to all of the councillors. And I'm proud to say that I've probably gotten my hands dirty and planted a lot of trees with almost all of you on council, and I'm delighted to look forward to doing the same with the rest of council. My name's Karen Brock, and this evening I'm speaking on behalf of Oakville Green Conservation Association, a local not-for-profit organization. Our mission for the past 21 years has been to protect and restore nature in Oakville. And in addition to our many community greening activities, we accomplish our mission by advocating for protection of Oakville's natural assets with community members, local institutions, including businesses, school boards, and various branches of local government. Next slide, please. And before I continue, I think I'm going to graciously accept Mr. Key's 1 minute, not known for my brevity. I think I'm into about 11 minutes here. I'm appearing here tonight to oppose staff's proposal to proceed with their preferred options for construction along the Lakeshore Road West Scenic Corridor. If you approve staff's recommendation tonight, you'll be approving the removal of nearly 100 mature trees. And I know we can argue about the number. But these are historic, resilient giants who grew with Oakville over 160 years. Although not highlighted by staff, you'll also be putting dozens of other trees at risk because of construction due to excavation and construction of curbs, gutters, and multi-use path. Next slide. We have to keep things in context, and we have to understand why we need new thinking. What's the current lay of the land? I will not paint a picture of an apocalyptic world, but anyone who's watched the news this week will understand where we find ourselves. We need a new way of thinking and acting. Everything we do must be examined through a climate lens. Our communities have become vulnerable to climate stressors, and we need to create resilient communities that can withstand the challenges that we currently face. Council declared a climate emergency in 2019, and we need to understand exactly what that really means. Staff's current recommendations do not reflect what Council specifically asked for in 2018. Why do we need to change our process and decisions? As COVID has shown us, emergency means that we cannot continue with business as usual. What I see in the current report in front of Council is a very business as usual solution with a conservative approach that has been used the past 50 years. We can't approach construction the same old way and expect different results. There is absolutely nothing progressive about chopping down hundreds of years of trees and sequestered carbon and removing the ecological services that they provide when the town has declared a climate emergency. Next slide. As many of the former delegates have mentioned, and here's a good infographic of all the different reasons that trees are important. Oakville's urban canopy is a significant asset to offset local climate change, and it is an asset that Council has the power to shape and grow. Protecting and growing the urban tree canopy is as impactful as electrifying buses and Oakville's newly minted energy plan. These are all initiatives that all reduce greenhouse gases. It's not a silver bullet, but the urban forest canopy is one of the key components of a climate management strategy. Despite a lot of work to date and good work by the town and many volunteers, Oakville's urban canopy has struggled to stay around 25% against a long-term target of 40%. And we need a more surefire plan to get to 40%. We're not tree huggers. We're not fighting to protect trees with a bucolic view of a sleepy Ontario town. We're fighting to protect our lives and well-being. That's what an emergency feels like. What is green infrastructure and how does it relate to this proposal? Oakville Green closely follows urban planning green infrastructure initiatives in Canada and beyond, and we are members of Green Communities Canada. Next slide. Green is the new gray. And there are indeed attainable green infrastructure solutions to all of the technical problems that the Lakeshore Road retrofit is addressing, including stormwater management. And I think reference has to be made to some of the upstream issues. But this photo demonstrates what we believe is very possible on Lakeshore. And also, we do have to look at other solutions within our community upstream. And that's very clearly stated in the town's urban forest report. Next slide. Green infrastructure is about tapping into the power of nature. And this is taken from Smart Prosperity Institute, written by a woman I know, actually. And governments at all levels too often undervalue natural infrastructure relative to gray infrastructure like sewers and drains and pipes. This results in a lack of investment to protect what we have and regain what we've lost. Natural infrastructure is in many cases more cost effective than gray infrastructure. And in sharp contrast to gray infrastructure, which loses value over the time, my favorite fact is that natural infrastructure can actually appreciate in value and extend the life of gray infrastructure. This isn't pie in the sky stuff, and in fact, Lakeshore has the ditches and a lot of remnant channels that do function in Southeast Oakville. Practical applications are already in place, led by Credit Valley Conservation locally, and they and Sustainable Technologies, a team that works with them, are leading excellent workshops for municipal staff to implement these cost-saving green solutions. These solutions are ideal for the Lakeshore project with a primary focus on green infrastructure, not gray. Enhancing a natural drainage system that's already performing well, as it is in Lakeshore, is much more economical and environmentally rich. Some specifics of our recommendations: zero tree loss. We're asking for zero tree removal, especially when we know there are alternatives and more environmentally friendly solutions to accommodate all the priorities listed for this project. On-road cycle lanes, pave existing roadway to add lanes for a safer ride. No multi-use trail on the south side due to excessive tree removal and risk to dozens of others. And we note that we need a 5 to 7 meter clear-cut zone to create a 3 meter wide multi-use path. This is not a line on a diagram, this is reality. Next slide. This is construction on Trafalgar Road, quite close to where I live. Construction is not delicate work. Next slide. In new developments, roads like William Halton Parkway, pictured here, north of Dundas, can include all options when you have a blank slate. But I can pretty much guarantee that everyone on this call will most certainly not be here before this landscape can be compared to the historic Lakeshore. And I certainly don't think it's a very desirable place to ride a bike right now. For a retrofit situation in a mature neighborhood as Lakeshore Road, the sacrifice to create a multi-use trail is too great. In retrofits, we need to help users to share the existing space safely and respectfully. Next slide. These are two of the trees slated for removal. As you can see, they're two of the gentle giants. I just wanted to speak to the status of the urban canopy, and as many of you know, there are many threats to the health, protection, and growth of our urban forest. The Growing Livability, a comprehensive study of Oakville's urban forest, is Oakville's most recent urban forest study, and it was completed in 2016. Next slide. The report contains observations, warnings, and recommendations that we cannot ignore any longer. Firstly, there are things that we cannot control when it comes to tree health. Disease and pests are threatening healthy trees. The emerald ash borer has infected our ash tree population, which we stand to lose most of our ash trees that make up 10% of our urban forest. That's approximately 200,000 trees. We all understand that we're losing trees due to infill development in mature neighborhoods. Provincial regulations override the town's tree protection bylaw, and we're losing canopy cover. Tree removal by permit for non-development reasons continues, and although Oakville's private tree bylaw now requires tree replacement, mature tree loss is still happening. What can we control? It's our decision to cut down nearly 100 healthy trees and prevent fatal damage to dozens of others. When you cut down a tree, you're not losing an object. We lose all of the services that they provide, often invisibly. Stormwater management, through soaking up of rainfall, its cooling properties, its shade, its air purification, the habitat that it provides, and of course, its beauty. Next slide. Staff's words ring hollow with the promise of replacement trees or attempts to go around trees. These trees simply are not replaceable, period. Concepts promising a proposed multi-use trail that will go around trees are misguided and unrealistic. Trees are not hydropoles. This shows a flawed understanding of tree biology. Arborist Paul Heltzer wrote, 90% of tree roots are in the top 10 inches, 98% are in the top 18. And as we saw in an earlier diagram, the tree's roots extend 2 to 3 times its crown. The tree root zone is a broad, shallow, and vulnerable network of roots. Root damage is not reversible. Next slide. And I'm getting close. The same urban forest report states that large diameter mature trees offer exponential ecological services compared to smaller young trees, as Stephanie Bush mentioned. An important statistic from the urban forest report, trees over 76 centimeters in diameter, or 30 inches, which is just under a yard, make up only 0.6% of our urban forest, yet they provide the greatest ecological function. Several healthy trees in this category, and I emphasize healthy, will be coming down with the proposed plan.
Ms.
The
Brock,
tree pictured here is just over a meter, or
Ms.
40
Brock,
inches in diameter or width.
excuse me,
The
Ms. Brock.
circumference.
Ms. Brock, are you close to wrapping up?
I am very close. I have one more slide after this. So this is a very healthy, hardworking tree. Let's dispel the myth that these historic old trees are in bad condition or dying. The 2016 Urban Forest Report writes of their high ecosystem service value and says these large caliper trees were, I quote, generally found to be in excellent or good condition. Last slide. And it just speaks to the green infrastructure and stormwater management. Staff is proposing full urbanization, and this is what that would look like. These are curbs, and if you add gutters and sewer pipes, it's going to be a disaster. Staff wanted to improve stormwater management, but we have found from a reliable source from the ministry, formerly of the Ministry of the Environment, that this approach is contrary to the stormwater best management practices recommended in place in the ministry since the late 1990s. So we're going to be removing canopy cover and increasing impervious surfaces, and this clearly council asked to avoid such a scenario. So we've got to think outside the box. We've got to look at a low impact alternative to improving recreational use, and we're all for that. A recreational path already exists on the north side, along with sidewalks on the north side of Lakeshore. Let's use some gentle, not so heavy-handed ways to increase the pedestrian and cycling options. And lastly, our summary. We request that Council preserve all trees along the lakeshore as per Council's original request. Investigate primarily green infrastructure solutions to stormwater management while increasing habitat and function. And newly announced, investigate how Oakville can qualify for some of the recently announced $200 million in federal funding for natural infrastructure. That should save us some money. And lastly, think outside the box to expand the recreational utility of that north side of Lakeshore. We have some tough decisions to make. It's been a long haul. I realize that for everyone, but it's a complex project in exceptional times, but we're not there yet. We don't want to commit the same mistakes as we have in the past. And we ask that you do not approve staff's proposed options tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brock, for your thorough presentation. Madam Clerk, is that the last delegation? Thank you. Council, it's my pleasure to turn over to you the opportunity to question staff, and the first hand up that I see is Councilor O'Meara.
Well, thanks, Your Worship. I didn't plan to be the first one up, but I guess sometimes that's how the ball bounces here. I'm going to try and just go through a couple quick questions, if possible, from staff, and then I'll sort of pull back, and maybe my other councilors can ask some questions. Firstly, I'm just curious. in the staff report, it says that we have done this EA and the assessment to 2031, and I'm really curious as to why 2031 when most of our planning is going to 2041 and even 2051. And then I guess my question, that comes with that is, are we underestimating things if we're only planning 10 years ahead of us here? Should we be looking at the use going further than just a mere 10 years?
Through you, Mayor Burton. The analysis was completed to 2031. Our traffic modeling is all done based on that horizon, because that's where we have our current best planning estimates and the modeling that was completed through the Transportation Master Plan. We are always looking at how we can reach and extend our mode split targets. It's beyond 2031, and that will be part of the next Transportation Master Plan. With respect to whether we're underestimating the impacts and the effects, I would refer back to the earlier comments that we really are counting on that mode shift to maintain that finding that really there is not a lot of impact in terms of future projected congestion on Lakeshore Road. And so if we don't see that mode shift, then we would be, yes, underestimating the impacts.
Okay, thanks. So the modal, you kind of answered another question I have. This project is premised, and the lack of traffic increase is premised upon an increase of pedestrian and cycle use, which is why we're doing the infrastructure here. And if we don't do the infrastructure, we're going to see it on the other end in additional vehicles and these sorts of infrastructures, which I get and I take, and I thank you for that clarification. I wonder if you can just speak to the tree numbers. We've heard from all delegates all types of numbers of trees. We've heard 123, 196 all over the map. Can you please just very clearly state to people where we are now with the tree number and where we are hoping to get to, or where we have the flexibility to get to, so that everybody's on the same page with the number of trees that we're talking about here?
Through Mayor Burton, at the environmental assessment study level, that is a higher level study, and we took our most recent GIS tree information to do our analysis and to plot on that the proposed recommendations for active transportation infrastructure and for improvements to intersections, as were discussed in the presentation. In April, we had the online consultation and public information center, and through that we heard many comments about trees. And so to try and address some of the comments that we were hearing and to prepare for tonight, we did retain an independent arborist separate from the EA study team to do an assessment of the trees that had been identified as potential for impact or under review through the EA. Through that analysis and through the site visits that the arborist did, they discovered that some of the trees that had been identified on our GIS layers were no longer in the field. They've been removed for other reasons unrelated to anything to do with the Lakeshore Road project that's before you today. And that brought the number down from 123 to 121 trees that had been identified as being having the potential to be impacted by the recommended infrastructure improvements in this study. Through their site visit, they discovered that 11 of those trees were in very poor health or had died. So there are 11 trees that would be removed regardless of any work that needs to be done by this project or by any other, just due to their health. They also discovered that there are 30 trees that they feel could be protected during construction so that they would not be impacted and could remain and remain healthy. So subtract those 30 off from, so you had 101, you take off the 11 that are dead or dying, brings you to 90. You subtract off the 30 healthy ones that can be protected, and that brings us down to 60 healthy trees that at this stage we feel have the potential to be impacted. As we move forward through the design and as we look at different construction techniques, our focus will be on trying to mitigate and reduce that number of trees. We will also be retaining an arborist again to do a detailed assessment based on the more up-to-date information that we'll have at that detailed design level. We'll have more current survey information, more current information on exactly where those multi-use trails, where the enhanced swales, where the bioretention facilities could go. And then that will allow us to assess again how many trees might be impacted, to do that inventory, to see what the health of those trees are, and then to look at opportunities to mitigate, to avoid any impact to those, and then come up with a new number that we could present.
Okay, thank you, Director. So we're 60 trees and going down as a best case scenario here, and not the 100 trees or what we've heard. Then is that what I'm correct in believing?
Through Mayor Burton, that's correct. Right now we are at 60 trees that we expect to be impacted by the recommendations before you, and our goal is to continue to work to reduce that number.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Mayor Burton. I'll cede the floor to my other council colleagues here, but I might return at the end.
Okay, well, I'm not going to be a heavy enforcer, but your procedure bylaw, your unanimously adopted procedure bylaw says that you get 2 5-minute sessions at this. And like I said, I'm not going to be the guy who lowers the boom on that, but if you want to follow your own rules, that's what they are. Councillor Robertson, you're next.
Hi, Joe, I have 2 questions. In terms of narrowing of lanes, in terms of the bike lanes on the street or the multi-use trail, can you tell me if that is something we would consider in order to get that multi-use trail without, and save more trees, and even go through block 4 if that was possible? Or is there something that says we have to have the 3 meters or we have to have the 2.4?
Through you, Mayor Burton, the Ontario Traffic Manual, Book 18, is the guidance document that we use for designing active transportation infrastructure, sidewalks, bike lanes, multi-use trails. The recommended width for a bike lane in that document is 3 meters, and that allows for 2 bikes to pass, or for somebody with a stroller and young children to have space to walk on a multi-use trail as well. It does say that the recommended minimum standard is 2.4 meters. And a bike is approximately 1.2 meters wide at the handlebars, so that'll, would provide that space for them to pass each other or to be going in opposite directions. At this stage, our recommendation is to go with that 3 meter wide width, because that is the standard that we would go with. That is recommended in our technical guidance. But as we get into the design, we recognize that there could be sections where it does make sense to narrow that slightly. And we would need to review those on a case-by-case basis and look at shorter sections. At this stage, we don't want to recommend that 6 kilometers or 4 kilometers be reduced to that lower standard. But there could be sections where it does make sense and helps us preserve the elements along Lakeshore Road to do that. In some areas...
What about the... Sorry. What about the actual on-road bike lanes? Because the examples that were given, that it's 1.3 meters in other places in the town, is that something we would look at, or we really want to keep them wider?
Through Mayor Burton, the same sentiments go for the on-road bike lanes. That at this stage, we're recommending the bike lanes be designed in accordance with Book 18, and that does recommend the 1.5 to 1.8 meters as minimum widths for those bike lanes. We want to make sure that they are wide enough to provide protection, that we are able to get people away from issues and impediments at the edge of the lane, but they're not too wide that they encourage passing or riding 2 abreast within the bike lane. So it's a balance.
Okay. And my last question has to deal with the scenic corridor piece. I heard several times tonight the whole aspect of this being a rural section, although we're now in a urban area of 211,000 people. Is a scenic corridor, is the rural piece part of the scenic corridor definition, or is that something different? Because you said ours doesn't negate what the current scenic corridor definition is.
Through Mayor Burton, the scenic corridor study had 4 major themes. Excuse me, and it did apply to both Lakeshore West and Lakeshore East, as well as to Trafalgar Road south of Cornwall. One of the elements is maintaining the proportions of the existing roadway. So really the width and the extent that way. But it does not preclude the use of curbs. And there are, in fact, many sections of the road, of that road and of the other scenic corridors that do have curbs. The key is maintaining the proportions and not looking at widening for additional vehicle lanes along any of our scenic corridors.
Are there other municipalities that would have scenic corridors with curbs as examples?
Through you, Mayor Burton, I know that there are other municipalities that have conducted scenic corridor type studies. Some of them have been more regional municipality level studies, such as the region of Waterloo, where they do have a larger proportion of rural areas. And it really was about more of the pull-off areas where you could get that scenic vista. So really, I think our scenic corridor looked at what makes Oakville's scenic corridor scenic and special, and really set the criteria based on what is important to our community.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for everything that the staff has done with this. I know it's been complex, and I look forward to finding out tonight how everyone is going to look at this as a whole for the town.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Dudek.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a whole lot of comments, but I'll save those for after. I guess the one question, sort of building on what Councillor O'Meara had asked, and the 60 trees that are now being suggested as being slated for being affected. How many of those are large stature trees? Because that has a certain merit, given the fact that we're dealing with the scenic corridor, which is known for large, majestic trees. So if 30 of those are large, majestic trees, that has a different bearing than ones that may constitute, you know, a smaller tree, so to speak.
Through you, Mayor Burton, I'm just pulling up that stat. Okay. So in block 4, so working east to west, the potential tree removals for trees greater than 20 centimeters diameter or breast height, so that's what we're considering the larger stature trees. There were 9 of them in that block. There were 20 in block 2, and then the rest would be in block 1, or sorry, 20 in block 3, and the rest would be in block 2.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Burton. Jill, when you did your presentation, you're saying you had people wanting the new paths and those who didn't. The emails I'm getting, it's like 90% of the people do not want the trees cut. Is your feedback quite different than what I've been receiving?
Through you, Mayor Burton, I believe the study team has received most of the emails that you may have received as well, Councillor Elgar. Anything that's come through the clerk's office, they've been sure to forward everything on to the study team. And so we are definitely seeing a lot of emails that are coming in with concerns about the trees. But we have also seen those emails, as I mentioned, saying that they like what we've proposed, or that they'd like to see more. I will say that in general, and I can't speak for all the stakeholders in this study, but in general, we hear from folks when they have suggestions to make or or comments to make to change what we've recommended, as opposed to often telling us that we have hit the mark or have recommended the right thing. So that may be a factor at play here as well, that we may be hearing from the ones who want to ensure their voices are heard to protect the trees, and we may not be hearing from the ones who are happy with the recommendation because they feel that their thoughts have already been heard and they've contributed to the recommendations before you.
So Jill, when I look at what we're proposing and what we think is right, and with what we have going through Oakville is something kind of special compared to most municipalities where the trees have been cut. But what could you do to make it work so that you have a cycle path and a separate walking path so we don't have the width issue? Because actually, Karen Brock in her presentation made a beautiful picture of what reality is when you are designing a path where you're making a 1 meter path. Let's say it was 1 meter. You have to go out a lot further than 1 meter to make a path that will last. And I think that was her point where the roots of the trees, like what could staff do? Might be groundbreaking, but what could we do to make it so they could have a bike path on one side and a walking path on the other side of Lakeshore that would reduce substantially the number of trees that would be impacted?
Through you, Mayor Burton, I think a key component of it would be the construction techniques that we employ, and that we make it a priority that those trees be protected through construction, and using things like hydrovacking to make sure that we are being very careful around the root systems of those trees, making sure that we are getting that detailed arborist assessment in advance of construction and building that into the design so that it's really informing how we move forward, how we design the infrastructure, where we propose to place it, working closely with our colleagues in forestry and using their expertise as experts on Oakville's urban canopy and our urban forest, and really trying to be leaders in terms of how we build and design this, and really taking that care at both of those stages to make sure that we are protecting everything to the best of our ability.
So Jill, if we redesigned the trails, is it possible we could not lose the number of trees we're proposing right now with an arborist involved? I'll tell you, my biggest concern is I think of the old oak tree, 250-year-old oak tree on Bronte Road, where there was a report made by a consultant telling regional council that in fact that tree only has a 10% chance of survival. Fast forward a couple of years, it bugged me so much, I got a copy of the actual arborist report, which stated that tree has a chance of survival 90% indefinitely. Like, what can we get, before we approve anything here, arborists to say what we can do to save those trees? Because when they're gone forever. And we all know 8-year trees at 8 years of age, if they survive that long, not a lot of canopy cover. So what could we do as a council going to make sure this works?
Council, to be fair to the director, it might be an answer that you could look to me for. One of the things that we could do is we could approve the general concept but require the detailed design to come back and judge it on the amount of trees that are saved, and if we're not happy, have the detailed design worked on again. I mean, the trouble with the stage we're at is it's too high level to get a final number on what's at stake. If we really want to get to that, we essentially have to do the detailed design so that we know where the trees are in jeopardy and where we can make adjustments.
Oh, Mayor Burton, I appreciate that. So we could do that where we're not approving things tonight, but we are sending it back for detailed design, which would, I think, make me very happy and probably everybody else. Is that a possibility that we could do?
Well, council absolutely could say, please take this concept and bring us back the detailed design to implement it that will minimize tree loss so that we can look where we want to make further adjustments. That would be in fact, that would be my recommendation.
Okay, I know it's Councillor Duddick and, the 4 councillors in those 2 wards, but I really would like to see something like that. I appreciate that. I thank you, and thank you for everything you've done, Jill. I realize it's not an easy task, but this is Oakville, and we've got a beautiful heritage driving through that area. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor, it's interesting. Zoom has a way of promoting you in the Hollywood Squares display that I see when you click your electronic hand. So I'm sort of working from the top corner over, but I just realized that the latest goes to the left corner. So now that I'm wiser about that, I'm going to try to go by who's had their hand up the longest. And that would be, I think, Councillor Adams. Councillor Adams?
Thanks so much. And that's fine. It's Zoom, after all. My question really goes back to Dane Morrison's presentation from the Oakville Cycling Club. He had a bunch of proposals around the different widths of the multi-use paths, the sidewalks, and the on-road bike lanes. And I wondered, as far as I understood what you had said earlier, those widths that were proposed by the Oakville Cycling Club actually met the guidance documents that we're basing on. They're narrower than the maximums that we've got, but they meet the thresholds as I understood it. Could we use those, and would it satisfy some of those issues that we've got? And he had a bunch of questions. He had 4 questions, but I think it kind of summarizes to, could this work, and would it better meet our need to save trees and so forth, and provide the continuous multi-use trail, which I think is,
Councillor, in a word, yes.
If you're a young family, that's an important feature. So.
Councillor, in a word, yes. But in order to maximize the quality of the result, the way you would best do this is to proceed to detailed design, and then where necessary, narrow it down to these minimums, and where possible, leave it at the best number.
Yes, I agree.
The only route to that is through
I have one question,
design.
which is a procedural question for you, Your Worship, which is, I think I see a draft motion which has a component of it that talks about the impact of eliminating sections of the multi-use path in blocks 2, 3, and 4. And I wonder if that's what's on the floor. Can we get the reverse of that to look at the detailed design, including a multi-use path in blocks 2, 3, and 4?
Okay, nothing's on the floor. A council member has to move something to put it on the floor. I have taken the liberty of suggesting that you could get where you want to get if you just added a requirement that detailed design come back for council approval before the project could begin. And that would be your simplest motion, because then you could take the provided staff recommendation and just add that feature. Those are...
Okay, sorry.
Okay, so there you go. I think I'm done.
Your Worship, can I just ask the director if that was put forward, whether that would be conceptually something that they could bring back, whether that's a feasible thing to ask our staff to do in terms of bringing back a MUT across blocks 2, 3, and 4?
The director has heard your question, and I'm sure she's happy to answer it.
Through you, Mayor Burton, yes, that is something we could bring back if directed to do so.
Okay, thanks so much.
All right, moving right to left, we come to Janet Haslett-Thiel, Town Councillor for Ward 3. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. Thank you, Director Stephen. I know that this is hard work. I have some naive questions, and hopefully you can help me through them. We heard tonight a lot about natural drainage and natural approaches gray versus green in terms of stormwater. What level of investigation was done on those alternatives compared to what's been proposed?
Through you, Mayor Burton, both the gray and the green stormwater infrastructure are recommended and come from the recommendations of two previous studies, the Coronation Park Area Drainage Study and the Townwide Stormwater Master Plan. The two need to work together to provide the level of protection for both stormwater quality and for flood protection on Lakeshore Road. We did investigate the potential in some sections of providing a purely green infrastructure solution, so no pipes. The impacts of that are significant in that they take up a lot of space and they provide very deep ditches that really would have similar types of impacts to what we've heard from many that they're trying to avoid today, because you can't have trees growing in those areas. You don't have that space available as usable boulevard space any longer because it has to be graded to convey that drainage. And really, there's not enough capacity even with that to do so. Many of the sections of Lakeshore Road already do have storm sewers under them, and the recommendations from the Stormwater Master Plan are to increase the sizes of some of those pipes in order to provide that flood protection. We've been very fortunate in Oakville and that we have not had some of the storms that some of our neighbors have had. And so, yes, our storm infrastructure has functioned very well, but we have not had that regional level storm that some of our neighbors have had. The green infrastructure, the enhanced swales, the bioretention facilities, are things that we can still and are still planning to implement on Lakeshore Road behind the curbs. We can have curb cuts and things like that to direct the drainage to them, to enhance the swales that exist today, so that they provide that water quality function, but they won't provide that conveyance of stormwater away from the area that the storm sewers would provide. So they really do need to be complementary.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. My next question is, and I'm not sure if you should answer it, if there's someone else who could answer it, but we've heard a lot of quoting of different carbon emissions impact, carbon sink. Could someone from climate change comment on your proposal and give us some factual data on any benefits or negatives as a result of this if we implemented it?
Remember, and I'm going to turn that over to our CAO.
Through you, Mayor Burton, I don't believe anyone from the climate change group is on the call tonight, but that is certainly something we could include if we did report back to you on the detailed design. That could be one of the elements that we would report back on.
I just to my council colleagues, I think that that's an essential. I mean, we've had we talk about having a climate emergency and looking things through a climate lens, and I mean, I struggle with making a decision tonight without that information. My next question is just about protected bike lanes, because I haven't heard anybody talk about them. Is there a reason that they have not been considered? Were they considered and then taken off? And if so, for what reasons?
Through you, Mayor Burton, in that time between the 2018 staff recommendation or staff direction to report back with that zero impact option and the 2019 recommendation to do the scenic corridor study, we did spend time looking at options for cycling lanes, because that was one of the components of that 2018 direction to maintain the cycling lanes. So we looked at a number of different options. We looked at a two-way cycle track. We looked at protected bike lanes with buffers and bollards. We looked at multi-use trails on either side, and we looked at what we've ultimately recommended, which is the bike lanes with the painted buffers. There were a number of factors that led us to moving to that recommendation. One of them was the scenic impact. those other alternatives. A cycle track would be much wider. It would be wider than, wider than a regular bike lane, wider than the multi-use path, and would be that paved swath of asphalt along the corridor. The bollards and curbs, we thought would also detract from the scenic elements of the corridor, but could be added later if we went with the painted buffer and if we determined that that was necessary. And then having the multi-use trails on either side without the on-road bike lanes, well, that would have tree impacts, greater than what we've talked about today. So again, we ruled that out based on those impacts. Even though we didn't have the scenic corridor study at that time and didn't have those specific elements, we did have the direction from that council resolution to minimize those impacts. And really, they did feed into what became the scenic corridor recommendations.
Thank you. I wanted to understand that, having had the pleasure of riding in Copenhagen, and there are a lot more people feel safe on a road when there's a protected barrier, but it sounds like that would mitigate a problem that we're trying to solve, which is maintaining the beauty of that road network. Those are my questions. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor. We're going to Councillor Ray Chisholm now.
Thank you, Worship. A couple of questions. With all the presentations, there was a lot of statements made by certain organizations and so forth. Is there a possibility of isolating all those comments, those details, and have staff, like in a matrix, and have staff answer those appropriately, agree or disagree, or there is relevancy on those comments? It just seems to me there's a lot of statements being provided, and I don't know if it's true or it's false information or it's good information based on the resources and sources that have been indicated by some of the delegations tonight. So I have is there any possibility of looking at all those points like we do in planning and development? Here are the issues, and we get a response to those. Is that a possibility?
Through you, Mayor Burton, we have endeavored to track, and all of the comments that we've received, some of them very much are comments, and some of them are great information, as you've mentioned. So we can compile that, and I would say we would report back when we reported back with the detailed design information as well.
Thank you very much for that. My second question is this one with the trees. I've heard there's been reference to historical trees or heritage trees. Do we have within the town a designation of trees with respect to heritage or historical, or is that just phrases that are just being out there now, or whatever? Because I've never heard that before. Is that something new?
Through you, Mayor Burton, in advance of tonight's presentation and in preparation, I did speak with our Director of Parks and Open Space to see if that was a designation we have, and no, we do not have a formal designation of heritage trees.
Thank you very much. And my last question is really not a question, is the whole idea of discussion tonight, and we're asking questions that would pertain to the details, and we're not into the detailed part of it. So I guess my statement is the devil's in the details, and I'm hoping that the next step that we can really roll up our sleeves and look at this site-specific, inch by inch, yard by yard with respect to how this development is going to go. It is a very complex development. It's going to take a lot of balancing and a lot of discussion with our community and with our staff and council to make this right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Giddings.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's apparent that many of my queries were shared by my council colleagues. One remaining is Councillor Adams talked about concern for young families. Further to that, if Director Stephen could just include coming back the older members of the community and their challenges, and how it relates to the AODA compliance as well.
Through you, Mayor Burton, really, we want to make sure that we're addressing all ages and abilities in what we recommend, the AODA components, and also, you know, our active seniors, our active young families that are moving through the corridor, our middle-aged cyclists who are just getting back on a bike for the first time in a long time, but aren't yet comfortable enough to ride on the road, and those who, you know, have been riding on the road for a long time and are very comfortable. You know, we have all kinds of people that are trying to move through the corridor, move to places along the corridor. It's not just about through the corridor. And we have people who will still be driving. And so really we were trying to look at all of those people who are moving to the corridor, from the corridor, and through the corridor.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for the signal. Councillor Duddick, you get to start the second time.
Through your worship, just to wear my heritage hat for a minute, I didn't want any of the public being misled when Ms. Stevens responded to the heritage issue. That's just in this study area. We do have, or did have, 2 designated trees, one being the white oak up Bronny Road, and the other one was in our ward at 42 Lakeshore Road West, which was the magnolia tree, which is no longer here. I just don't want to mislead people that we don't have heritage trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Your corrections are always welcome. All right, Council, I think you've arrived at the point where you need to make a decision, and decisions start with motions. Who wants to try one? Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Chisholm and I have spoken about this at length. And we did have, as Councillor Adams had referenced, another motion that was provided to us in advance of this meeting that we could consider for approval. But looking at the original one, I think it has, the one that's in the report has the most, it's captured things without causing more problems than it's worth. My only concern is on item number 3, and it speaks to what Councillor Elgar had referenced earlier, where he had said not approving anything, but coming back with detailed design, where we will go through that phase of sort of analyzing everything. So I guess in item number 3, I'd say that the preferred solution concept proposed in the EAB receive, not approved, and proceed to detailed design, and that further, and again, I have a problem with the words mitigation to tree impacts be explored. To me, they've got to be stronger than that. It's got to be something whereby we're not just taking it into consideration or we're exploring something, they'll be addressed, okay, or something to that effect. You're very good at wordsmithing. And the other issue is private lands are not incorporated in that. And that's that other issue of the original motion we had in 2018.
All right. I think I'll ask the clerk. Thank you for the signal. Council, I'm going to offer you a brief recess while the clerk attempts to write that up so that we can put it on the screen for you, so that we can be clear about what we're talking about. Please don't go far. I don't think it'll take more than 5 or 10 minutes. And I only say 10 minutes because of the way technology keeps disappointing from time to time. Before we do that, Councillor Adams, your yellow hand is up. Did you want something now?
Yeah, I wondered if while staff are drafting something, could they also draft an element that would have them return with a detailed design with the a multi-use trail concept that would go through blocks 2, 3, and 4? For our consideration?
Yes, we will. We will put that up for consideration.
Thank you.
Council, I'll just, for the public, Council has the ability to split proposals into pieces and vote on them individually, so it's perfectly fine to prepare that. Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel, do you have a request too?
I do.
Is it possible to ensure that it says something to the effect that they will re-engage with the public on the detailed design and return to council for further consultation?
Yes, that's absolutely possible. All right, any other suggestions? All right, we are in recess for 10 minutes or until the call of the chair. So, we have sent you the text of the revised motion, and we are prepared to put it on the screen for you. And we have divided it in, like every single point is only one thing, so that if you want to remove one or change it, it should be easier for you. And on the other hand, we had to send it twice because we forgot it, we didn't get all of them the first time. But as I look at it, I like them all. And I think now is a good time to put it on the screen. And I will just, if everybody's back, I will call the meeting back to order. So let me see. So I have a monitor here that shows me that the public can read it, and you can read it too on your screens, I believe. Councillor Duddick, you had the floor and you still have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm fully supportive of everything. The only thing that gives me concern is item 7, and it's the fact consider always regarding the multi-use, because in certain areas of our sections 3 and 4, those multi-use trails may greatly impact the trees that are in that area. So if you could say something that the detailed design consider options to provide a multi-use trail, the other way to me indicates it's got to happen.
It was intended as an alternative than options. In fact, options is probably a better word.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear.
Thank you. Options was, always was meant to mean the same thing as options, and it's probably better to change the use of always to options throughout, like in 5 and 6.
I appreciate that. I'm quite comfortable with that.
All right. Councillor Hazlitt-Thiel.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. I'm wondering if we could add that that climate change staff report on the impact of the proposal at the next at the presentation of the detailed design.
Yes, that was intended to be covered by item number 8. Would you, instead of greenhouse gas, would you like to change greenhouse gas to climate change impacts?
Okay, I'm not seeing that. Okay, hold on. I must have the wrong version in front of me.
Yes.
Okay, revised. Okay, number 8, that the detailed design provide council with enough. Again, I analysis of the climate change impact is my preference, but I can live with the way it is. Thank you.
We're happy to have it your way. Climate change or greenhouse gas.
Well, I think the climate change is more comprehensive.
Okay.
And yes, I know that means more work, but it does speak to
you got it.
Different. Okay, thank you.
Sean, I think your hand was next, then Ray.
Thank you, Mark. Just a question to staff. And I mean, in order to do the detailed design, how do we give them such an open-ended motion as number 7? I mean, do they not need to know what they're going to do before they go to, or are we asking them to spend money to do, 4 or 5, like, yeah, I guess 6 different designs on a couple of ways for all blocks to, like, what are we asking them to do in terms of the impacts to get into a detailed design for multi-use trails in blocks 2, 3, and 4? That's really my question.
What we're expecting is a detailed design which has listened to council tonight and the public and heard and understood and uses those various techniques that were discussed by delegations and by staff in terms of minima and ideal widths to produce the desired result. And I would just add that the multi-use trail already exists in blocks 2 and 3, and we only put in 2 and 3 because the councillor asked for it. And he may want to keep it that way because it might feel protective of what's already there. I don't know, but he should speak for himself on that.
Okay, yeah, I just, to me, I don't think council was coherent one way or another. I mean, over like let's go explore options with it or without it. So I think we're throwing basically where we were tonight right back at them to go and do it again. I didn't see any sort of what's the word? Was it kumbaya moment where we understand this is the path we want to proceed. And I'm wondering if staff need a direction. I think we have no MUTs, we have some MUTs, we have all MUTs. I'm just not sure what this is by all options. I don't understand what the direction is we're giving to them other than everything.
It does not say all options. It says consider options to provide a multi-use trail in blocks 2, 3, and 4, where I hope everybody understands a multi-use trail already exists in block 2 and 3. And staff are comfortable with this direction. They have told me that they can deliver against this. And then that will put in front of council a new opportunity to balance the competing demands of all the issues we're trying to satisfy.
Okay, I'll wait for the report. Thank you.
Bottom line, you'll still have to make a choice. Councillor Robertson. Or not. If not, Councillor Robertson, then
sorry, I was muted.
Okay.
I just wanted to speak more to that in terms of the multi-use trail, because the preferred design has it on one side. So options, even where it exists in sections 2 and 3, if it moves to the other side or anything in terms of their options, I think that's the wording is great on this in terms of where they could possibly go.
Okay. All right. Then I guessed correctly about including 2 and 3, I'm thinking. Madam CAO?
I think on the last point, Mayor Burton, some clarity on whether or not provide a multi-use trail would not include providing one on both sides of the road. It's that to provide a multi-use trail feature within that block. If that's what the request is, I think that can be accommodated.
Yes, the words are clear. A multi-use trail is singular. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Worship. Maybe we're just going over old roadway here again. That was my concern too. The option to provide a multi-use trail, yeah, and it is singular, so I'm fine with that. I thought in the original one we were looking at what the impact would be in providing a multi-use trail. My concern is that understanding the impact by putting a multi-use trail in, what trees we would have to lose or have to be removed based on that. I would like to know what the impact will be.
Well, at the detailed design stage, you're going to have the opportunity to approve or disapprove because you never lose your ability to make decisions in pieces. You know, you can.
That's fine. So I'm fine with this. I'd be happy to move this motion when it comes.
All right.
Finally,
I will accept.
Wordsmithing it. Thank you.
It's always in order to make a motion, and I accept your motion. Councillor Hazlitt-Deal. We would like to hear you, so you're going to have to find that mute button.
Sorry, there we go. I'm wondering if it's possible to put in that additional investigation be done on alternative drainage that enables a more rural network.
Well, Councillor, we already have the urban profile in stretches. And I don't know, I mean, you can certainly try it, but personally, I think it's, well, we'll put it up and we'll vote on it. I think, so. To maintain a rural profile, I think is what she's asking for.
Yeah.
You know, I think we all understand where it exists, or would you like that? Maybe we should add that just for clarity, because people will come along after and wonder where it exists.
Thank you, Mayor Burton. You're always helpful with all this drafting. You're just great at it.
All righty. Okay, Councillor Chisholm, are you taking the 12 points in front of us? Are you still moving that?
Yes, I'm fine with that.
All right. Then may I see the gallery view so I see all members of council, please? Thank you very much. It needs a seconder, and I will now look for a second. Councillor Elgar is the seconder. So
Mayor Burton, I would defer to Councillor Duddick. I'm sorry.
All righty. Councillor Duddick, are you seconding it?
I hate to be silly, but why don't you get one of the Ward 1 councillors to second, given that it's a combined effort?
I think that's a lovely gesture. Is there a Ward 1 member who'd like to do that? Councillor Robertson, thank you. Now that we have most of the poly tests taken care of, Councillor O'Meara, you're showing interest in something.
Your Worship, I would like to separate out item number 7, please. Recommendation number 7.
All right. Do you want to change it or just try to vote it down?
Yeah, I don't agree with it in principle. Just to be honest right now, I mean, the okay. Option, sorry, it's not on screen anymore with the revised, so I can't see it, but to provide a multi-use trail, that already exists right now. So that's saying, the option is saying to do nothing. Because
sorry, but Councillor, it does not exist in Block 4.
Well, okay, that's fine. It exists in blocks 2 and 3, and I just don't think that's good enough. I think our active transportation plan needs to have a way with the width so seniors and children can cross each other safely. And it's not good enough to just have an MUT that is you know, a 1.5 meters wide. I think if we're not looking at ways that people can be safe and cross each other in the winter and in the spring and in the summer safely without fear, if we're not going to explore that, then I can't support that item, because that's not what the seniors in my ward are looking for, and it's not what the kids and the families in my ward are looking for. They need to be able to pass each other on a infrastructure that we've developed safely and without fear. So I don't see that in that recommendation unless I'm misreading it.
Councillor, I would suggest that you may be misreading it. There is no width or number in that clause. We'll put it back up for you right now. It doesn't say anything about trimming it. It just says there should be one. And we considered, Councillor Adams asked for this phrased as blocks 2, 3, and 4. And we contemplated the fact that a multi-use trail already exists in 2 and 3. And we thought about making this just say 4. But we anticipated that council might like to put 2 and 3 in as a protective measure, as if to say, and don't take it out of 2 and 3. And, but nothing here talks about its width.
Yeah, the previous recommendation that staff had was an MUT on the south side of Lakeshore in addition to a sidewalk. A lot of the delegations tonight said there's already an MUT on the north side and a sidewalk on the south side. What I'm reading in option number 7 just says, to me, it says in blocks 2 and 3, that's fine with what we've got right now, because the options to provide a multi-use trail in blocks 2 and 3, that already exists. So there's no need to provide additional to what is in blocks 2 and 3 right now, then that is already there. That's what I'm reading.
We get to separate, you get to separate them on request. I was only trying to see what change, if any, we could make to it to make you like it, and it'll be separated.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship.
Okay, can I see the gallery view again then? All right, may I put the vote on items 1, all of the items except for item 7? Is there any objection to the items except for item 7? Madam Clerk, I see no objection, and that is carried. May I put the vote on item 7? Is there any, raise your hand if you object to item 7. It's close, Sean, but item 7 carries. All right, thank you, everybody. And, you know, I really have to congratulate you. It's not even 10 o'clock yet. I didn't even have to ask you for a motion to go past the hour of 10:30. And so now, if I can find what I did with the rest of my agenda. Yeah, here it is. What we need is a mover and seconder for consideration and reading of bylaws. Councillor Duddeck, Councillor Longo, thank you. Any objection? Madam Clerk, there being none, the bylaw is adopted. Council, congratulations. You made some tough decisions, or rather, you made a decision and put off the tough decisions for detailed design, which is, I think, I've sensed all along that's what you really wanted to do, was judge the detailed design. And so you're going to get your wish. It's been great working with you, and that has ended our meeting. Bye-bye.